Chapter 226 Press Conference. Just as Zhang Guo gnashed his teeth and cursed wildly in his heart, thinking about how to remove the bastard Borsellino from his adjutant, a timid voice suddenly sounded behind him. "That, General Zhang Guo, I want to interview you here, is it convenient for you?" Zhang Guo was startled when he heard the words, and then immediately showed his joy. Sure enough, there are still people who know what they are doing. He quickly restrained the smile on his face and turned around calmly. What came into view was a young female reporter wearing glasses and professional clothes, holding a camera and a notebook in her hands, looking at him expectantly. It seems to be a newcomer. Zhang Guo looked at the somewhat reserved female reporter in front of him, with a gentle smile on his face, and said softly, "Of course, no problem, what do you want to interview? As long as it does not involve confidential information required by the military, I can tell you." He paused and winked at the female reporter. Exclusive news. The female reporter's eyes lit up when she heard it, and she was surprised. "Really? That's great, General Zhang Guo." Zhang Guo smiled and said, "Of course, what news do you want to report? About that war, my plan for this action, or my judgment on the future development of the sea situation?" The female reporter opened her notebook, took out a pen, and looked forward to it. "What I want to interview you about," she said a little embarrassedly. "Do you know Brigadier General Daren's mate selection criteria?" Zhang Guo. The smile on his old face became stiff. "What news agency are you in?" Zhang Guo tried to maintain a smile on his face and asked. The female reporter was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Entertainment Gossip News Weekly." Warring States. The corners of his mouth twitched, and a few black lines floated on his forehead. "Regarding the question about Commodore Daren, I suggest you go and interview him directly." The female reporter pointed to the Commodore, who was surrounded by people a little embarrassedly. "There are too many people over there for Commodore Daren." Her face was slightly red. "I can't squeeze in." Warring States. The female reporter saw that Warring States' face was getting darker and darker, and added, "There happened to be no one here, so I ran over immediately. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to interview you later." Warring States. He rubbed his chest with his hand, looked at the female reporter in front of him expressionlessly and said, "You should be an intern, right?" The female reporter was shocked when she heard this. "How do you know?" She looked at the admiral in front of her with a face as black as the bottom of a pot in shock, and said admiringly, "Admiral Zhang Guo's judgment is really amazing." Zhang Guo. He saw it at a glance. "Okay." Zhang Guo suddenly felt a little tired. He sighed and waved his hand. "I don't know Daren's mate selection criteria. You can interview him later. Anyway, as long as the woman is beautiful, the damn boy will not let her go." After saying that, Zhang Guo turned around a little lonely, and his back was bleak through the crowd, walking towards Gangu Kong. In order to deal with more and more reporters, interviews, a long table covered with red cloth was soon brought up. A temporary press conference was held. The people present were the main core figures of this operation from left to right. Admiral Zhang Guo of the Navy Headquarters, Commodore Daren of the Navy Headquarters, and Rear Admiral Borsellino of the Navy Headquarters. Click, click, click. As soon as the three of them sat down, the flashlights kept flashing, and the enthusiastic reporters were frantically shooting at the stage. "Then let's officially start." Steelbone Kong, who was standing in the audience, shouted casually. All the reporters at the scene raised their hands as soon as the voice fell. Their eyes fell on the yawning Navy Commodore, without even looking at Zhang Guo and Borsellino next to them. Zhang Guo. "Daren, come on," he said unhappily. Daren was stunned for a moment, then glanced at the audience and randomly pointed to a reporter. The reporter who was called stood up excitedly, staring at Daren with burning eyes, and asked, "Commodore Daren, it is said that in this operation, the Navy sneaked into the auction and used a large amount of funds to conduct the auction." Daren smiled and nodded. "Yes, all this is to facilitate the operation. After all, our real target this time is Golden Lion Shiki. Before the target appears, we must hide our identities." As for the source of funds, we have to thank the support of the headquarters. Waring states. He looked at Darren in astonishment, and the latter smiled at him. The smile of Kong Gangu in the audience froze immediately, and the veins on his forehead bulged. Zephyr next to him immediately grabbed his hand, his face flushed with anxiety. Old Kong, don't be angry, don't be angry. So many people are watching. Kong Gangu gritted his teeth. At this time, Darren called another reporter. Commodore Darren, I heard that this time the Navy not only annihilated the Golden Lion's fleet, but also took the Momo fruit, a powerful devil fruit. Can you tell me a thing or two about the use of the Momo fruit? Darren smiled. This time it is a victory for our Navy as a whole. The Momo fruit is a trophy, and our Navy values it very much. Of course, Marshal Kong and Admiral Zhang Guo considered it again and again, and finally decided to let me freely deal with the Momo fruit. I am very grateful for this. Zhang Guo. Steel Bone Kong. Don't do this, old man Kong, so many people are watching. Zephyr quickly hugged Steel Bone Kong's arm, and the latter was already red with anger. This damn kid, how to deal with the Momo fruit, I haven't decided yet. Zephyr, let me go. Steel Bone Kong roared with gritted teeth. Zephyr was sweating profusely and lowered his voice to say. The previous owner of the Momo fruit was Bondi Waldo. Darren killed Bondi Waldo and made a great contribution this time. It is only natural for him to deal with this devil fruit. What about the funds for the auction? Nearly 1 billion funds. That brat bought things himself and asked the headquarters to reimburse him. Gangu Kong roared through his teeth. Zephyr's mouth twitched and he coughed lightly. Just consider it a reward for him. Gangu Kong. You bastard, only protect your students. Zephyr chuckled. At this time, another reporter stood up, the female reporter who just interviewed Zhang Guo. Commodore Darren, I want to ask you a question. I believe this is also very curious to many people. The female reporter's cheeks were flushed, looking at Darren and asked. What are your criteria for choosing a spouse? As soon as this was said, the onlookers immediately poked their heads curiously. Especially the girls and ladies, their faces were flushed. Darren pondered for a moment, blinked at the female reporter, and smiled. I'm sorry, this question is a naval secret, I can't tell you. Waring states. Steel Bone Kong. Zephyr. Seeing that there were still many reporters raising their hands, Darren raised his hand and pressed it down, smiling. I'm sorry, let's stop here for my interview. He pointed to the bandage on his chest. As you can see, I am still injured and need more rest. I will let General Zhang Guo answer the following questions one by one. Darren stood up from his seat and looked at Zhang Guo sincerely and said. Although I took advantage of the situation and destroyed the Golden Lion's flying fleet, I can tell you frankly that General Zhang Guo, he is the real hero. Without his protection, without his planning, without his deterrence, without his trust and support for me, our Navy's action this time would never have been successful. He is the biggest contributor to this battle. Next, let's welcome General Zhang Guo with warm applause. Darren was the first to applaud. Seeing this, the reporters also applauded. The applause soon became thunderous. Zhang Guo only came back to his senses from the shock just now, looking at the expectant eyes of the reporters below looking at him, and after a long pause, he slowly showed a bright smile. He gave Darren a grateful look, then straightened his chest and cleared his throat. The confidence of the past appeared on his face again, and he smiled with high spirits. Well, then I will just say a few words. Please give me everything. Thank you so much. Chapter 227 Distribution of War Merits. Marine Headquarters, Marineford. Marshal's Mansion. Gurgle gurgle. Zhang Guo took the hot tea handed over by the guard. The tea was clearly still steaming hot, but he drank a few gulps without hesitation and put the empty cup back in the guard's hand. Give me another cup. Everyone stared at him in amazement. Zhang Guo saw everyone's gaze and smiled a little embarrassedly. I'm a little thirsty. Aren't you thirsty? Everyone. You spoke those 2 sentences, for 3 hours without any rest time. Of course you are thirsty, bastard. Kong Kong rubbed his temple helplessly. At the beginning, Zhang Guo at least got to the point, and conducted a detailed question and answer session around the Coin Island operation, which well demonstrated the wisdom of the Navy's planning and its powerful combat power. But 10 minutes later, the old guy just let himself go. He began to recall how difficult it was when he first became a Navy. How hard he worked, and how many difficulties and obstacles he had to go through before he was promoted to the position of Admiral of the Navy. From the goal of the Navy's establishment to the development expectations for the next few decades, he was so excited and spitting at the press conference. At least half of the people ran away, and the remaining half were drowsy. Thinking of this, Gangukong glared at Zhang Guo, sighed, turned his head and looked at the Navy Commodore who was sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed on the other side, and a smile appeared on his face. "Darren, you did a great job this time." He lit a gold-plated cigar and said with a smile. "To be honest, even I didn't expect you to be able to do this. It's so easy." The Flying Pirates Fleet, which has been a headache for the senior officers of the Navy headquarters and has been fearful for many years, was easily annihilated by Darren. If the facts were not in front of him, Steelbone Kong would not have dared to believe it. Darren, who was smoking a cigar, smiled modestly. "All this is thanks to the support and trust of Admiral Sengoku. If it were not for the unconditional trust of Admiral Sengoku, I would never have had such an opportunity." Steelbone Kong laughed and scolded. "Don't talk political rhetoric here. And you Sengoku." He suddenly turned his eyes and glared at Sengoku. "Don't grin there. Look at what you have done. A good press conference has been turned into a sharing session of your personal journey. Look at what you have done in this operation. Besides standing there to scare the Golden Lion a little, what constructive things have you done? If you could have done a better job, would Darren have been injured so badly?" Kimball Kong scolded Zhang Guo, causing the latter to shrink his head. "Have you thought about the questions the reporters asked? This operation is almost the same with or without you." Zhang Guo's face immediately turned red, but he couldn't say a word to argue. He felt very wronged. He was not good at speed and burst, and it was not easy to contain the flexible Golden Lion. If they were to fight head-on, Zhang Guo thought he would never be at a disadvantage. But the bastard Golden Lion didn't fight him head-on. He had to chase Darren and fight him. "Old man Kong, can you blame me? Even if Garp came to this matter, it would not be much better." Zhang Guo became depressed and said a little aggrievedly, "The boy's injury is not serious but just a fatal injury. With his monster-like physique, he will probably be alive and kicking in a few days." "What did you say?" Steelbone Kong's voice suddenly rose. Zhang Guo was startled, his face suddenly became extremely serious, and he said in a deep voice. "I said Marshal Kong's teaching was right, this time it was my fault." Steelbone Kong looked at the honest and well-behaved Zhang Guo with anger and amusement, and shook his hands weakly. Zhang Guo's personality is like this: a nice way to say it is flexible, and a bad way to say it is smooth. If it were Zephyr, the stubborn old boy, he would probably have to argue with me or even quarrel with me. Thinking of Zephyr staying in the training camp day after day, Kong Gangu felt his head hurt even more. What a bunch of troublesome little devils. He shook his head, dispelled the chaotic emotions in his heart, and said seriously. "I have read the specific battle reports. You all did a good job this time. The next question is about the distribution of military merits. There is no doubt that Commodore Darren, the greatest credit this time belongs to you." He laughed. "This time, there should be no problem with your promotion." Darren smiled and nodded. He could have been promoted to Major General of the headquarters half a year ago, but because of the defection of Drago, the promotion was shelved. Although he was not very interested in the so-called position of Major General of the Navy, no one would dislike his high official position. At least in this way, he finally caught up with the progress of Sakaski and Borsellino. No need to salute superiors when meeting. But Darren didn't wait for a few seconds to be happy. "Borsellino, you did a great job this time. Not only did you severely injure the top cadre of the Beast's pirates, Flame Disaster, Jin, but you also showed a strong battlefield dominance in the Battle of Coin Island, and intercepted the Golden Lion in time many times. Gang Gukong smiled and looked at Borsellino, who was sitting there on the other side. Congratulations, Vice Admiral Borsellino. Borsellino pretended to be surprised when he heard it, opened his mouth slightly, and raised his hands in the air. I really didn't expect this. Did you say so, Major General Darren? He looked at Darren with a smile. Darren. You didn't expect it, so why are you asking me? This bastard must have done it on purpose. Yes, Vice Admiral Borsellino. Darren gritted his teeth. But then again, Borsellino's promotion to Vice Admiral is indeed well deserved. Although he was lazy and slacking off every time he went on a mission, this guy would be there for almost every important battle. And with his devil fruit ability, he performed at the right time at the critical moment, and no one could find fault with him. If you say he didn't take action, he did, and the scene was scary. But if you say he took action, it seems that it doesn't matter whether he took action or not in the end. This timing is also unique. He kept rubbing here and there, and his military exploits were rising rapidly. In addition, he was the most experienced of the original 3 admirals, so his promotion was naturally faster than Sakazuki and Kuzan, and it was not surprising that he was promoted to the position of Vice Admiral of the headquarters earlier. Kimbolt Sora looked at the weird look of the two of them and couldn't help but smile. It's good to be young. Thinking back then, Garp, Sengoku, and Zephyr were also like them, quarreling and fighting every day, and even fighting, and they have been quarreling for so many years. Now they have become legends in the Navy, and the dazzling new generation of the Navy has thrived under their protection. As the Admiral of the Navy, this is one of the few moments of relaxation for Kong Gang. As for the arrangement of the Momo fruit, Kong Gang spoke again in a deep voice. Darren immediately sat up straight, staring at him with burning eyes. Zongguo's expression was also a little anxious. The power of the Momo fruit is naturally self-evident. If he is allowed to arrange and deal with this devil fruit, it will play a great political role. For example, using rewards for combat merits, or cultivating his own confidence. Just as it was said at the press conference, let Darren deal with it in the future. Kong Gang made the final decision. This meeting ends here, and I won't say more. The specific training will be carried out together when the training camp graduates in a month. Dismissed. Please everything, thank you very much. Chapter 228, Calling for a Job Title at Work. After Darren and Borsellino left the marshal's mansion, Zongguo still stood there, looking as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Just say whatever you want to say. Gang Ji Yu Kong glanced at him and said unhappily. Zongguo, who had long been unable to hold back, couldn't wait to speak. Old Kong, are you going to give this Momo fruit to Darren? Gang Ji Yu Kong raised his eyebrows, pondered for a few seconds, and said. Zongguo, I know what you mean. He slowly exhaled a puff of smoke, and his old eyes flashed with wisdom. The Momo fruit is indeed a force that cannot be underestimated, but that's all. Compared to the uncertainty of the Momo fruit, the strength and potential that Darren showed in this operation are clearly in front of us. If he doesn't participate in the battle, it's not certain whether you can seize the Momo fruit this time, let alone annihilate the Golden Lion's flying pirate ship fleet. And since Darren has already spoken, with my power, of course I will forcibly take back the Momo fruit in his hand. He may not say anything on the surface, but he will definitely have more or less complaints in his heart. You know the character of that kid. If you don't give the Momo fruit to him this time, maybe he won't go on the next mission for various reasons. Warring States paused when he heard this. He thought seriously. After a look at Darren's character, I finally found that what Marshal Kong said was indeed very reasonable. That kid is vindictive and has a clear distinction between love and hate. He is the kind of person who will not treat you badly if you treat him well. But if you make him unhappy, he will definitely repay you double. After analyzing it this way, things become very simple. Is it a powerful devil fruit, or a monster with the best potential and strength in this era? Zongguo can still tell which is more important. Zongguo, you don't have to worry. Although the Momo fruit is given to Darren for disposal, who can he give it to? Steel Bone Kong suddenly laughed, his eyes confident and domineering. It was a look of control over everything. In the end, this devil fruit will eventually fall into the interior of our navy. As for who that person is, it doesn't really matter. As long as that person is a member of the navy, that's enough. Hearing this, Zhongguo was silent for a long time, and then raised his hand to salute respectfully. I understand, Mr. Kong. My vision is too narrow. Steelbone Kong nodded, then frowned. How many times have I said that when working, we should call each other by their positions? Zhongguo saluted solemnly. Yes, Marshal Kong. Steelbone Kong. After leaving the Marshal's mansion, Darren and Borsellino chatted casually. So who are you going to give the Momo fruit to? Borsellino asked seemingly casually. Darren smiled and said. Who knows? There is no rush for this. If the Momo fruit is developed properly, its power will be quite amazing. But for now, Darren does not have a good candidate. Although the young man named Arthur left a good impression on him, even when facing powerful pirates like Charlotte Perospero and Charlotte Daifuku, he resolutely took on his responsibilities. Darren appreciated this very much. This is also the reason why he wants to get Arthur from Sengoku. People who are afraid of death are not qualified to be his subordinates. But for some things, willpower and courage alone are far from enough. On this sea, if you don't have good enough talent, it's not worth cultivating no matter how hard you try. The truth has always been so cruel. The kind of scene where you can beat the villain by shouting, "Friendship, our bond," may exist in anime, but Darren has never really encountered it. Of course, with his personality, I'm afraid he wouldn't take it seriously even if he saw it with his own eyes. Whether the young man named Arthur is really worthy of his vigorous cultivation, he needs to continue to observe for a while. Borsellino glanced at Darren and changed the subject. The North Sea Fleet has recently purchased a large number of laser weapons from the Ministry of Science. He looked at Darren with a smile. It seems that the military expenditure there is much more abundant. Darren smiled flawlessly. I heard from Admiral Flying Squirrel that the economic development of the North Sea has been quite good during this period. Borsellino smiled even more. Is that so? That's really something worth celebrating. When he was about to reach the gate of the training camp, he stretched his body. Well, I'll go back first. The science department has made many new technological breakthroughs recently. If Brigadier General Darren, no, Major General Darren is interested, you can come and have a look when you have time. Darren nodded and smiled. Of course I'm interested. I'll take the time to go there, Lieutenant General Borsellino. Borsellino smiled, and his figure spread into countless photons and disappeared on the spot. What a cunning guy. What are you thinking about, Borsellino? Darren stood there, muttering in deep thought. Darren. At this time, a cheerful and enthusiastic voice came from the gate of the training camp in the distance. Darren looked up and saw Kuzan and other people in the training camp walking towards him with a smile. Why are you here? Kuzan flashed to Darren, clenched his fists, and said excitedly. Of course we are here to welcome you. I didn't expect you to actually annihilate the Golden Lion's fleet. This is so cool. Huo Shaoshan looked expectant. So is the Golden Lion Shiki really that strong? Doberman gently punched Darren's chest with his fist and smiled heartily. Welcome back. Ghost Spider maintained his cold style and said hoarsely, I really want to fight with you again to see how strong you are now. Others also surrounded Darren enthusiastically and asked questions curiously. They were not the core layer of the headquarters, so they could not see the specific battle report. They could only learn about the Coin Island incident indirectly through newspapers and various channels. Looking at the familiar faces in front of him, Darren seemed to be in a relaxed mood, and answered their questions one by one with a smile. At the back of the crowd, Jiaji looked at this scene with an indignant look, and pouted. Tisk, it's just destroying dozens of ships. It's not like killing the Golden Lion. Thinking of the scene at the end of the press conference when a lot of ladies and girls were flirting with Darren, he was so angry that his teeth itched. At this time, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Commodore Darren. Everyone paused, and Darren looked in the direction of the voice, only to see a tall and straight man. The figure stood in front of the training camp with a cold look. Lieutenant Colonel Guillaume. Darren greeted with a smile. Guillaume said expressionlessly. Can you come over? I have something to talk to you about. Darren was stunned. Okay. With a swish, the others immediately opened a passage. Cake saw this scene, his eyes rolled, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up a treacherous smile. Hehehehe, Guillaume looks like he is angry. Darren, this bastard is going to be in trouble. Beat him up hard, hehehehe. Half an hour later. Guillaume was in the administrative office of the military academy. The office was in a mess, as if it had experienced a war. Pink short tops, black hot pants, purple and red stiletto high heels. All kinds of clothes and stationery and papers on the desk were scattered all over the floor. Darren sat on the spacious and soft sofa, smoking a cigar happily. Guillaume, who was covered in sweat, was wearing his white shirt and nestled in his arms like a kitten, with a dazed look in his eyes. Do you feel better now? Lieutenant Colonel Guillaume. Darren looked at the beauty in his arms and smiled frivolously. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 229 Special Gift. Don't call me by my title. Guillaume felt a sense of shame for no reason when Darren raised his chin so frivolously and called him, Lieutenant Colonel Guillaume. Oh, this is your exclusive office in the training camp. If I don't call you by your title, what should I call you? Darren looked at the girl with a queen-like temperament in his arms with interest. Guillaume, who was always cold, showed such a shy and dazed expression, which made him unable to stop and smiled. You also know this is an office. You damn bastard. Guillaume noticed Darren's mischievous look and bit Darren's shoulder viciously, but there was no trace left, but it hurt his teeth a little. What a joke, if the iron body was broken by her like this, it would be too weird. It's because I know this is an office that I can't wait. Sorry. Darren smiled and played his scum style to the fullest. But you clearly enjoyed it just now. Guillaume rolled his eyes at him. This lecherous bastard locked the door as soon as he entered the office, and then couldn't wait to hug himself. But what made Guillaume even more ashamed was that he didn't know if it was because he was in the office, he seemed to be more sensitive than usual. A sense of excitement that she might be discovered at any time hit her heart. This evil thought made Darren feel like an electric current running through her skin every time he touched her skin. Numb and itchy. Asshole. Guillaume cursed in a low voice, somewhat unwilling to admit it. Darren smiled, stretched out his hand to help Guillaume smooth his messy, sweaty hair, and praised sincerely. Guillaume, you are so beautiful. High and cold and mature temperament, white face with lingering blush, red lips exhaling fragrance, tiredness with laziness, proud personality mixed with a bit of contrasting shyness. Guillaume at this moment is indeed a different style. HMPH. Guillaume hummed, slapped his claws away with a cold face, raised his head to reveal his slender white neck, like a proud white swan. Darren could clearly see that the corner of her mouth was slightly raised with an invisible arc. What a proud girl. I haven't seen you for a while. Do you miss me? Darren exhaled a puff of smoke from his mouth, stretched out his hand to hold Guillaume's slender waist, and said softly. No. Guillaume snorted and turned his head away from him. Darren sighed sadly and said sadly. That's a pity. I brought a gift for you. Really? Guillaume turned around in surprise, but met Darren's mischievous eyes, and her pretty face suddenly became hot. As if to cover up something, she hesitantly said. I'm not expecting your gift. Darren smiled, and suddenly a coin appeared in his hand like a magic trick. A coin. Guillaume was startled. It's not just a coin. Well, this is one of the spoils of my operation this time, a coin from the Coin Island. Darren said with a smile, full of confidence. Be patient. As he spoke, faint blue arcs suddenly bloomed between his fingers. A strange scene appeared. In Guillaume's gradually widening beautiful eyes, the coin in Darren's hand suddenly melted, and wriggled, like a living thing, and then stretched and deformed. Like the silk thread of a delicate craftsman, and like the ups and downs of weak ripples, the liquid metals entangled and intertwined with each other, and finally outlined a beautiful flower shape. In Guillaume's eyes, it was like a pale golden rose, blooming brilliantly in the hands of the Commodore. Looking at the gold foil rose in his hand, Darren gently exhaled a breath of turbid air, and a layer of cold sweat had unknowingly seeped out of his forehead. If it weren't for the many battles that improved the development of my devil fruit ability, I wouldn't have been able to do this half a year ago. The level of sophistication required to reconstruct a coin into a gold foil rose is unimaginable and very difficult. It requires the user of the magnet fruit to have a high level of control over the devil fruit ability to be able to do it. I thought that there was nothing special about the coin island, so I came up with this idea. When I go on a mission in the future, every time I go to a country, I will take a coin of that country's currency and make you a rose like this. Before Darren finished speaking, he felt his mouth being passionately blocked by a pair of warm lips. Kiss hard. After 10 seconds, the two separated. Darren stared at Guillaume, whose eyes were moist and her face was slightly red, and asked with a smile. Do you like this gift? Guillaume didn't dare to look Darren in the eye, but nodded with a red face. Looking at the exquisite golden rose, the corners of her mouth lifted up involuntarily. There are many people pursuing her on this sea. Young talents from the big chamber of commerce, princes of the allied countries, elites in the navy, and talented nobles. These people pursue her in various ways. Wealth that ordinary people can't spend in their lifetime, famous swords that suit their tastes, various rare treasures, and countless love letters and flowers received. But no one has ever given her such a cheap and expensive gift. Coins are everywhere on that island, countless. But thinking in her heart, it was on that island that Darren relied on these coins to easily annihilate the invincible fleet of the legendary pirate Golden Lion Shaki. This coin has a unique meaning. The most important thing is that, unlike others, Darren carefully used his devil fruit ability to add his feelings for her on the coin with unique meaning. How could Guillaume not like this unique gift? So, have you missed me during this time? Darren saw Guillaume's shy look, and the desire to tease him became stronger, so he smiled. Guillaume bit her lower lip with her pearly teeth and glared at him fiercely. Darren laughed and hugged her waist tightly. Again. Guillaume widened her eyes and worried subconsciously. Your injury. It's okay. Darren didn't think so. Wait, let me go, bastard. Aren't you enjoying it too? How could it be, this kind of thing? Iron block. A soul-stirring low moan spread in the empty office. Happy times always pass very quickly. After 2 hours, Darren left Guillaume's office contentedly. After mastering the special use of iron blocks, Darren has completely transformed and is invincible. As for Guillaume, her personality is very arrogant. She has tasted the sweetness of it, but she often pretends to be reserved. However, it is precisely because of this inexplicable sense of contrast that the training process is more interesting. It's time to go home. Darren touched his chin, slightly tidied up his messy clothes, and walked towards the family compound with his head held high. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 230 returned to Bay High. Another 2 hours passed. The soft sunlight at dusk cast mottled light and shadows in the yard where fallen leaves fluttered, and the dust in the air was filled with ripples. The wide pink kimono, the small underwear, the white socks, and the slender belt were scattered all over the tatami. Do you like this gift? Darren embraced the stunning Tian Yushi with one hand, and gradually, transformed, a gold leaf cherry blossom with the other hand, and said gently. Ah she, I know you like cherry blossoms. For this mission, I thought that there was nothing special about the coin island, so I thought of this idea. I promise you, when I go on a mission in the future, every time I go to a country, I will take a currency of that country and make you a cherry blossom like this. To commemorate our love. Tian Yushi was lying in Darren's arms like a docile kitten, with a happy blush on her face. She saw the exquisite and beautiful cherry blossom in Darren's hand, her eyes were misty, and she whispered with tears in her eyes. Thank you, husband, I like it very much. She carefully stroked the new and old hideous scars on Darren's chest with her hands, and her tone was gentle and worried. But Ashi only hopes that her husband can return safely, and this is the best gift for me. Darren smiled and said, of course there is no problem with this. Looking at the beauty in his arms, he couldn't help but compare Gion and Ashi. In terms of appearance, Azuki Toki is definitely the winner. After all, she is the woman who gave birth to Hiyori Kazuki, the first courtesan in Wano country in the original plot. But Gion's figure is more popular, especially due to the habit of long-term training. Her long legs are tight and powerful, very exciting. As for personality, they also have their own merits. Ashi gives Darren a sense of security, and her gentle style seems to be able to let you unload all the burdens and pressures. And the arrogant Gion gives Darren a feeling of fun and excitement, full of desire to conquer. At this point, Darren's smile became more intense. Isn't it for such a life to fight for life and death in the Navy? If you live a hard life, no matter how noble your faith is, it would be too depressing to be a Navy. How long will my husband stay at home this time? Tien Yushi drew circles on Darren's chest with her slender fingers and asked softly. Darren thought about it and replied with a smile. I don't think there will be any missions in the short term. I have to give others some opportunities to perform. And I will graduate from the training camp in less than a month. I still have some cultural credits that I haven't completed. If I go on a mission, it will probably be an internship before graduation. The training camp also has cultural courses. After all, this is a training camp for elite officers. The original intention of the training camp was to train generals for the Navy. A series of knowledge such as navigation, climate, geographical environment, history of various countries, naval warfare tactics, etc. are involved. Although the course content is not too detailed and in-depth, but only superficially covered, Darren has been skipping classes for the past 6 months and went to GARP for special lessons, so generally speaking, he still needs to spend some time to catch up on cultural courses. As for sea internship, it is a tradition of the training camp. During the period of graduation, Zepha, as the chief instructor, will let all the students of the training camp to go out to sea to perform internship tasks. On the one hand, it is to allow the students to adapt to real combat as soon as possible, and on the other hand, it is the final graduation assessment. The specific content of the internship task is different for each class. It will be determined by Zepha, the chief instructor, according to the current situation of the sea, and each student will be scored according to their performance during the internship task. Therefore, there is no possibility of cheating based on the content of previous classes. One day later. North Sea. The sky was filled with dark clouds, and the world seemed to have entered the night. God's sanction. A huge column of thunder and light penetrated from the dark clouds, like a roaring dragon, instantly submerging the figure in the center of the island. The world instantly fell into a brief silence, and the dazzling white light deprived all vision in front of us. Boom. 1 second later. A huge roar like the collapse of the sky and the crack of the earth suddenly sounded. A magnificent explosion bloomed in the center of the island, and the purgatory-like wind spread wildly in all directions with the strike point of the falling lightning as the center, uprooting all the vegetation and trees within a kilometer. The vast dust surged like waves, and the flames danced endlessly. It was unknown how long it took. The wind slowly blew away the dark smoke, and a tall figure stepped on black military boots and slowly walked out of the sea of fire. A touch of blue lightning passed through the void, and then quickly gathered into a figure. The flying squirrel, with wisps of lightning wrapped around its body, looked at the unharmed Commodore in front of him, and said helplessly, "I said you rarely come back to the North Sea, just to undermine my self-confidence." Darren patted the dust off his body. Under his feet was a bumpy ground covered with charred holes. He smiled and said, "I have to come back from time to check on your practice and see if you have made any progress. The power of the thunder fruit is really terrifying." Flying squirrel. The divine punishment I released with my full strength. Didn't even scratch your skin, and you're here to tell me, horrible. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't beat this bastard, the flying squirrel really wanted to pin him to the ground and beat him up. He really deserves a beating. Seeing the twitching of the corners of the flying squirrel's mouth, Darren's mood became much better. He raised his hand and patted the former's shoulder, smiling. "I'm serious. Your progress in developing the thunder fruit has exceeded my expectations." The flying squirrel sighed and said, "I can't let you down. Otherwise it would be a waste of this devil fruit that is known as the strongest natural fruit." Darren smiled and shook his head and said, "I know you can do it." He was telling the truth. The flying squirrel's development of the thunder fruit is indeed very good. As one of the elite vice admirals of the Navy headquarters in the original plot, the flying squirrel is the mainstay of the justice force in the entire world. His talent in the Navy is definitely ranked first, only below the admiral and admiral candidate. With such superior talent, coupled with Darren's guidance and the flying squirrel's own hard work, the flying squirrel has developed the thunder fruit to a level close to that of Enel in the original plot in less than half a year. This is both expected and unexpected. It can be seen that the compatibility between the flying squirrel and the thunder fruit is quite high. If the progress continues at this rate, after the flying squirrel further improves his swordsmanship and masters the domineering power, he will definitely be able to become a candidate for the admiral level in the future. As for whether he can truly step into the threshold of the admiral level combat power, it depends on his own luck. I am grateful for everything. Chapter 231 The Strongest Fleet. The combat power of the Imperial General level is the top combat power on this sea. As long as you really step into this level, you can enter the ranks of gold medalists. This is the threshold between the truly strong and the weak. Some people can't cross it even if they work hard all their lives, but there are also some monsters with talents like demons who can easily enter this magnificent palace. The flying squirrel's own potential is already good enough, and with the thunder fruit given by Darren now, it is not impossible for him to step into this level. Hearing Darren's words, the flying squirrel rolled his eyes. This guy said it easily, but in fact, no one except himself knows how much time and energy the flying squirrel has spent in the past 6 months to develop the power of the thunder fruit. What the flying squirrel didn't tell others was that when he watched Darren's strength become stronger day by day, an indescribable sense of anxiety and urgency was constantly growing in the former's heart. It's not because of jealousy. But he is always afraid that he can't keep up with Darren's pace. What if, although this seems unlikely to happen, but what if, one day, Darren, who is as strong as a monster, encounters an invincible enemy, or falls into a life or death dilemma? What if he really needs the help of his deputy, but he is too weak to support him? The flying squirrel dared not imagine that scene at all. As if he saw something, Darren patted the flying squirrel on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't put so much pressure on yourself, many things will be fine if you let them take their course." How has the fleet developed recently? Speaking of business, the flying squirrel immediately entered the working state, and his expression quickly became serious. "It's not bad. With the foundation you have laid, the situation in the North Sea is very stable. As for the Don Quixote family, since the last time he gave Doflamingo a reminder, he has been much more obedient, and the fleet's tax revenue has shown a steady upward trend overall." Darren nodded. He knew the warning that Flying Squirrel gave to Doflamingo, which was why he gave the thunder fruit to Flying Squirrel. That kid Doflamingo has this kind of personality, arrogant and defiant. Sometimes I really don't know how to discipline him. Without a good solution, only a practical lesson can make him behave a little better. Darren said with emotion. Flying Squirrel. You really put yourself in the role of father. You made such a big fuss in the New World this time. It is estimated that the Don Quixote family will behave a lot for a long time. Tisk tisk tisk, Golden Lion Shiki's fleet was annihilated by you just like that. You are really cruel. I heard that Golden Lion is a guy who will take revenge for any slight. When he said the last sentence, there was a hint of worry and vigilance in the tone of Flying Squirrel. Darren smiled disapprovingly and said, I don't think I will leave the headquarters in the short term. What can he do? If he really dares to come to Marineford, then I am really looking forward to it. A fierce murderous intent flashed in Darren's eyes. He raised his hand and gently stroked the knife wound on his chest that was still aching, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. I remember the knife he cut me with clearly. The Flying Squirrel was speechless, and then smiled with relief. Golden Lion Shiki will take revenge for every grievance. Maybe. But the flying squirrel knew deeply that the guy in front of him was not a good person. Darren was a madman who dared to kill the celestial dragons just because he was in a bad mood. It has been a year since the shocking dragon incident. During this time, Flying Squirrel kept thinking about why Darren took such a huge risk to kill Sild Saint. Was it because he felt pity for the civilian father and daughter? Maybe. But with Darren's calm personality, he would never do such an impulsive thing because of momentary pity. Is it because of his pride and responsibility as the king of the North Sea, and because of the rule he set that, you must do things if you receive money? Maybe. But Flying Squirrel knows that responsibility, obligation, rules, and other things are actually insignificant to Darren. These are not the reasons why Darren took action. The real reason why Darren took action to kill Sild Saint, the arrogant dragon, was actually hidden in the last sentence Darren said to him that day. That guy's face is so disgusting that I have the urge to kill him. Or I can't control it no matter what. I don't like him, he makes me feel bad, so I want to kill him. Even if he is a celestial dragon. This is the righteousness practiced by Darren. Do whatever you want righteousness. Golden Lion Shiki may have set his sights on Darren, but hasn't Darren already set his sights on Golden Lion? Flying Squirrel has never seen Darren suffer at the hands of anyone. By the way, how is the development of the fleet's laser weapons going? Darren remembered what Borsellino said. A smile appeared on the face of the Flying Squirrel, and he said, "It's going well. Vinsmoke Judge is indeed one of the top scientists in this sea. He has successfully deconstructed the energy core of the laser weapon and transformed it. With my current development progress of the Thunder Fruit, each charge of the laser weapon requires after a 3-minute charge, it can release at least 50 laser cannons. In the past 6 months, the fleet has expanded from 10 to 20 ships, and is still expanding at a steady rate of 2 ships per month. As of now, our North Sea fleet has a total of 20 main battleships, each of which is equipped with at least 5 laser cannons and 5 conventional heavy artillery, and there are 8 supply battleships. According to your previous idea, it is estimated that in the second half of the year, the size of the North Sea fleet will expand to about 25 ships, and all the weapons carried will be updated and replaced, officially forming a large-scale maritime combat fleet." Darren nodded with satisfaction. He recognized the working ability of the Flying Squirrel, especially in handling military affairs. He was more patient and even better than himself. Although he had gradually withdrawn from the daily affairs of the North Sea fleet, Darren also gave a blueprint for the development of the fleet with the vision and insight of modern people. A modern maritime fleet far beyond this era. Replacing traditional wooden structures with high-quality alloys, replacing natural wind power with efficient energy, and replacing backward gunpowder shells with advanced laser weapons. After the transformation of Germa 66, the warships of the North Sea Fleet have gradually taken on some shadows of modern battleships. The cost of warship manufacturing, transformation, weapons loading, etc., each ship is more than 5 times that of the same level warships of the Navy headquarters. If Darren had not plundered the wealth of the Sky Island Golden Town, he would not have been able to build such a terrifying fleet even if he emptied the entire North Sea. And this North Sea fleet, armed to the teeth, will become his most powerful force and confidence in the future. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 232 Sweating profusely, right. By the way, I heard that you had a conflict with Big Katakana Mom. The Flying Squirrel seemed to remember something at this time and asked curiously. Darren smiled helplessly. It should be considered as I killed her 2 sons in front of her. Flying Squirrel. What do you mean by, should be considered? With the style of that crazy woman Big Katakana Mom, you killed her 2 sons, she will probably chase you all over the sea and never stop. Wait. He suddenly stared at Darren with a suspicious look on his face, hesitantly said. You said it should be considered. What does this mean? You didn't do anything strange. As the Admiral of the North Sea, coupled with his cautious and calm personality, Flying Squirrel is naturally very familiar with the bounties of major pirates in this sea, and can even be said to know them like the back of his hand. Although big katakana middle dot mom Charlotte Lingling is now nearly 40 years old, she still maintains a beautiful appearance. And Darren, this guy, has a romantic style. What are you thinking? Darren's mouth twitched, and he cursed unhappily. I didn't do anything. I also have integrity, okay. He gritted his teeth. Really? The flying squirrel couldn't help but mutter. He looked at Darren with suspicion, and said in disbelief. Your reaction is too strange. The flying squirrel knew Darren too well. Generally speaking, he was always as thick-skinned as a city wall when it came to women. But Darren's big reaction made him suspicious. Darren. So what happened? The flying squirrel smiled. Darren's eyes twitched, and he turned his head away, pretending to look at the sea in the distance in a nonchalant manner. That crazy woman wants me to be her husband. He said in a low voice. What? The flying squirrel opened his eyes in astonishment, and couldn't believe his ears. Darren said unhappily. I said that crazy woman wants to give birth to a child for me. You bastard, you clearly heard it. The surroundings were silent for a second. Puff. The flying squirrel suddenly held his stomach and laughed, his face flushed and tears came out of the corners of his eyes. Ha 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 ha. Darren looked at the flying squirrel in front of him who was laughing so hard that he fell backwards and forwards, his eyes trembling constantly. Ha 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 ha. Why? Don't you agree? The flying squirrel laughed so hard that he could hardly control himself, and his body trembled. Charlotte Lingling, she is a great beauty ranked among the pirates. Ha 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 ha. And that kind of charming mature woman, isn't that the type you liked most in the North Sea before? Ha 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 ha. Besides, the two of you have cultivated the steel body, this is simply a match made in heaven. Ha 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 ha. Maybe you can use your unique charm to conquer Charlotte Lingling and make her turn to the light. Maybe we will even award you a Medal of Honor, ha 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 ha. The flying squirrel laughed so hard that he never stopped laughing. He didn't even notice Darren next to him, whose face was gradually turning as dark as the bottom of a pot. You should just obey her. This doesn't seem to must be a bad thing, huh? Crack. The flying squirrel's laughter stopped abruptly. He looked down with a confused face, only to see that his hands were actually shackled with a pair of black shackles. Instantly, an unprecedented sense of weakness surged over his body, making him almost unable to stand, and his whole body became limp. The powerful force quickly faded like a tide. Seastone shackles. The flying squirrel exclaimed in astonishment. Darren, this guy, actually carried this thing with him. But isn't he a devil fruit ability user? Why does he seem to be fine? The flying squirrel subconsciously looked up, and what caught his eyes was Darren's half-smile. A chill suddenly surged from the soles of his feet, running up his spine all the way to his forehead, making the flying squirrel feel numb on his scalp. Why don't you laugh? Darren stood there with a gloomy face, smiling and moving his neck, crackling his fingers, making a crackling sound of frying beans. Are you sweating all over? The flying squirrel forced an ugly smile. Hey, Darren. Don't be impulsive, I'm just kidding you. He felt his legs go weak, not knowing whether it was because of the suppressive effect of Seastone on the devil fruit ability user, or because Darren's eyes in front of him were too scary. Of course I know you are joking. Darren said with a fake smile. The flying squirrel took a step back, looking alert. Then you are not angry, right? Me? Of course I am not angry. Darren smiled. What is there to be angry about? Oh, you're not angry, then I'm relieved. No way. The flying squirrel's eyelids twitched wildly, and he said in a trembling voice. Then, what do you want to do? Darren clenched his fists, and even squeezed out bursts of air explosions at the moment of clenching his fists, making the flying squirrel's heart beat wildly. This is the confrontation training of Seastone. He said seriously. This is the training method I learned in Wano country. It works quickly and the effect is quite good. Well, it's just that the process is a bit painful. Just bear with it for a while. Flying squirrel. The next moment. Ah! The miserable wail of the flying squirrel continued to sound in the jungle of the deserted island. New world, a certain sea area. Whitebeard pirates, main ship Moby Dick. The huge dark clouds were like black ink, constantly seeping in from a very far distance. The originally clear sky seemed to have entered the night in an instant, and there were strong winds and huge waves on the sea, and bursts of dull thunder kept flashing in the dark clouds. The weather changes so quickly. A young captain frowned and looked at the sky. No, it's not climate change. Marco's figure jumped down from the mast, his eyes became extremely solemn, and he said coldly, "Something terrible is coming." What? Others also gradually realized that something was wrong. Kazuki Odin, who was leaning against the mast and drinking alone, seemed to sense something. The drunkenness in his eyes disappeared and he stood up suddenly. His eyes were fixed on the distant sky, and his only remaining arm subconsciously pressed the handle of the Tianyuzan on his waist. As a warrior with strong swordsmanship, he felt a domineering and sharp breath, whistling from the sky in the distance at an astonishing speed. No, it's that guy. Marco's face suddenly changed, and he turned his head and shouted to the crew who were facing a great enemy. All those below the captain level retreat to the cabin. But the moment he said it, he knew it was too late. Boom! The dense black and red thunder suddenly spread across the sky, and the light of varying brightness reflected the shocked and pale faces of the Whitebeard pirates. The sea was full of strong winds and huge waves. The boundless momentum turned into a substantial impact wave, shattering the clouds. Many young crew members were struck by lightning in front of this impact, and the weaker ones even rolled their eyes and fainted directly. The world in front of them was as terrifying as purgatory. The troublesome guy is here. Whitebeard, who was sitting on the main seat with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. He said impatiently, picked up the huge sword, Kuromoku Kiri, next to him, stood up with his tall and majestic body, and his long golden hair fluttered in the wind. Ha 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 ha. A savage and brutal laugh suddenly came from afar. Then, in the surging sea of clouds, a ferocious figure suddenly broke through the clouds, wrapped in a black and red lightning storm, holding two swords, and fell towards the Moby Dick at a terrifying speed like a meteorite. The long hair like a golden mane danced wildly, like a roaring flying lion. Golden Lion, Shiki. Newgate, Sasabaridana. Ask for everything, grateful. Chapter 233 The Navy Kid. It's Golden Lion Shiki. A legendary pirate as famous as my dad. Damn it, why is he here? Everyone prepare to fight. The sea was full of wind and huge waves, and the Moby Dick was violently shaken in the storm. The Whitebeard pirates stared at the figure swooping down from the sky in horror, with unprecedented fear in their eyes. Fearful and solemn, they all drew their swords, as if facing a great enemy. As members of the Whitebeard pirates, even some of the newcomers who had just boarded the ship had heard of the terrifying reputation of the Golden Lion more than once. This man was moody, cruel and ruthless, and was a completely different pirate from his father. Feeling the suffocating feeling coming towards him, Marco was horrified and his expression changed. At this moment, the Golden Lion not only did not have the slightest dejection and sadness of the destruction of his fleet, but also had a domineering and unruly aura, even more crazy and terrifying than when he was on the Coin Island, not long ago. Not good, Odin. Marco's face suddenly changed slightly, and before he could react, a burst of hurried footsteps sounded behind him. Odin. What are you doing? Everyone couldn't help but exclaim, looking at a one-armed figure in samurai clothes suddenly jumping up from the deck in astonishment. Ha 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 ha. Such a strong kendo aura. Let me see your strength. At this moment, Kazuki Odin's face was no longer drunk, his eyes burst out with a strong and amazing fighting spirit, and the strong wind blew his loose samurai clothes up. Looking at the arrogant Golden Lion swooping down, Kazuki Odin's heart was completely abandoned at this moment. His purpose of sailing from Wano country was to travel around the world and see all the magnificent scenery and beauty on this sea. And Whitebeard took him in, making him feel the warmth he had never felt before on this pirate ship. No matter who it was, he would not allow them to challenge Whitebeard's majesty. Kazuki Odin leapt up into the wind, leaned down with his upper body, and pressed the handle of the aim no Habezen with one hand, making an offensive gesture of drawing the sword. Swish! The The flowing domineering aura was like the beautiful cherry blossoms flying in the air, dotted on his arms, and then quickly spread, immersing the entire Aim no Habazen. The moment he raised his head suddenly, Kazuki Odin suddenly drew his sword towards the flying lion swooping down from the sky. The world of light and darkness suddenly brightened, as if it had temporarily entered daytime from darkness. The dazzling sword light suddenly bloomed. The sword light was in front, and the samurai was behind. It was as if the peerless sword was dragging the figure, like a meteor that cut through the sky, rushing into the sky at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. Taoyuan 10 punches. Ha 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 ha. You're looking for death, little brat. Facing such a dazzling knife, the golden lion's brutal eyes condensed and burst into a crazy grin. Zzz. Bundles of black and red lightning suddenly bloomed from the blades of the two famous swords, Sakura 10, and Dead Wood, like fireworks, and the majestic power tore the surrounding void. The scene was as terrifying as a demon. Don't block the way. As if holding two beams of black and red thunder, the golden lion swung the knife with red eyes and chopped it down. Boom. The next moment, the two of them collided with each other like a meteor hitting the earth. A twisted black and red energy storm compressed and condensed where the three swords were about to collide. Kazuki Odin's pupils instantly shrank into fine needles. No collision. This is the ability of Whitebeard. Before he could react, the golden lion had already laughed wildly and chopped it down. A large black and red thunderstorm hit Kazuki Odin's chest heavily, and while the blood mist exploded, his body fell to the Moby Dick like a kite with a broken string, blowing a hole in the deck, causing others to shout anxiously. A blow severely hit Kazuki Odin, and the golden lion shot towards Whitebeard with unabated momentum. Whitebeard frowned, grasped the huge sword in his hand, took a step forward, and slashed from bottom to top. The same amazing black and red lightning storm densely crawled all over the void around the sword. The two swords and the sword collided in the air. Boom. The boiling black and red energy ball appeared again, colliding, twisting, and expanding wildly between the two people's weapons. Lightning and purgatory-like winds surrounded the two people and rolled out. The roaring wind storm rolled in all directions. The sea surface of several kilometers in radius was instantly in turmoil at this moment, and huge waves hundreds of meters high were set off. The sea of clouds in the sky was shaken and disintegrated, and the deck of the Moby Dick was pressed to appear dense cracks. Many members of the Whitebeard pirates were blown away, holding onto the masts and other fixed objects with both hands to avoid falling into the sea. Captains such as Marco raised one arm to block their eyes, staring at the two ghostly figures with shocked eyes. Dad, I'm going all out. There's actually someone on this sea who can fight on equal terms with Dad. It's too scary. It's like the end of the world. At this moment, both Whitebeard and Golden Lion's eyes burst out with red light, their long golden hair danced wildly in the opposite direction, and their auras rose to the highest point. Boom. Accompanied by a roar like the collapse of the sky and the crack of the earth, a majestic wave of air suddenly rushed into the sky, tearing a huge gully in the thick sea of clouds. The sky was torn apart. The two retreated at the same time, and everything returned to calm. The howling tsunami on the sea surface fell from the air, splashing water vapor all over the sky. Ha 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 ha. Newgate, it's been a long time since we last met. The Golden Lion smiled and put away his two swords, picked up a bottle of strong liquor from the cargo on the deck, opened it and drank it. He glanced at the samurai who had crawled out of the hole at this time, grinned. Your sworn brother is quite powerful. He looked at Kazuki Odin, whose chest was bleeding but whose eyes were extremely hot. Hey, samurai, you should be a two-sword swordsman, right? That move just now was less fun. Kazuki Odin smiled with a pale face. It's just an arm. It won't take long for me to get used to it, even stronger than before. He looked at the arrogant lion in front of him. Not only did he not feel defeated, but he looked eager to try. Too strong. This man is really too strong. And unlike Whitebeard, Golden Lion is just like himself in the past, a great swordsman who can use two swords. And even Kazuki Odin has a feeling that Golden Lion Shiki may be the strongest swordsman of this era. After fighting with such a madman, Kazuki Odin felt that his kendo level had a new understanding and improvement. He subconsciously tightened the handle of Tianyuhazen, his eyes full of confidence. With the experience of this fight, he is confident that it won't take long for him to return to the peak. No, even stronger than before. Then I'll wait for you. Golden Lion smiled indifferently, then looked at the gloomy Whitebeard, and picked up a bottle of wine and threw it to the latter. What's wrong, Newgate? We haven't seen each other for so many years. Are you so unwelcoming to me, your old friend? He squinted his eyes playfully. You don't even want to drink a bottle of wine with me. After all, we were once partners on the same ship. Whitebeard narrowed his eyes, stuck his sword into the ground, opened the bottle and drank it. A bottle of wine was finished in less than 5 seconds. Whitebeard smashed the empty bottle with a pop sound, sat back in the main seat, and said coldly, I've finished a bottle of wine. Shichi, if you have any nonsense, just say it quickly, otherwise I'm afraid I can't help but sink you directly into the sea. Ha ha ha, you're so ruthless. The Golden Lion grinned and said, I came this time. He licked his slightly cracked lips, and his eyes exuded a crazy and violent look. I want to talk to you. An interesting Navy kid. He glanced at the samurai with a broken arm playfully. Speaking of which, he and your Whitebeard pirates have a lot of hatred. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 234 He will be your father. New World. Cake Island. The environment of this island is very unique. Every building on the island is pure white cream style. If you look closely, you will be surprised to find that the main material of the building is made of cake. The sky is gloomy and it is drizzling. The drizzle is continuous, washing away the rich cream aroma of cakes on the island. A corner of Cake Island. On the land covered with fragrant grass, the members of the Charlotte family did not wear the weird clothes of the past, but wore simple black clothes. Their eyes were drooping, and the black figures stood in the drizzle, looking very depressed. 2 gray and white tombstones stood in front of them. Charlotte Perospero's tomb. Charlotte Daifuku's tomb. In front of the tombstones, various sweets and flowers were placed as a memorial. Snap, snap, snap. Muffled footsteps came from behind the crowd, mixed with crisp sounds. That was the sound of spiked boots stepping on the ground. Everyone was stunned and made way for a passage. A tall figure walked slowly in the drizzle. It was a young man about 20 years old, with a murderous aura and a pair of eyes like a cold and hard blade, extremely cold. He had short red hair, slender legs, and the exposed muscles on his upper body were clearly outlined, full of unparalleled explosive power. There were pink tattoos on his left arm, left upper body and left back, and a skull-shaped tattoo on his left arm. The overall clothing style was full of strong black metal style, wearing black jeans and spurs on the back of his leather boots. A large white scarf covered the lower half of his face, and the black windbreaker behind him rose and fell gently in the cold breeze. The surface of his riding boots and windbreaker was still stained with coagulated flesh and blood. As he walked along, the air was filled with a pungent smell of blood. It's Katakuri. Why is he back? Didn't he say he was suppressing the resistance forces in Edlenko? It seems that the suppression has been completed. The 13,000 rebels who tried to resist my mother's rule were all slaughtered by him within a day. What is going on? Didn't they say that the situation was at a stalemate? I don't know, but it seems that Katakuri heard the news of Perospero's death and started killing people directly. Such a strong smell of blood. The members of the big katakana middle-mom pirates looked at Charlotte Katakuri, who was walking steadily, with doubtful expressions, and whispered to each other. At the funeral, someone sneer, ridicule, worry, sadness, grief. Even though the members of the Charlotte family all have Big Mom's blood flowing in their bodies and are brothers connected by blood, not every member of the Charlotte family will be sad for the death of Perospero and Daifuku because of their different biological fathers. For some marginal family members, their death is a good thing. This means that the position of the Minister of the Management of Nations is vacant, and the vacancy also means that they may gain power and status. For the treacherous relationship between her children, Big Mom herself does not care, and even lets it go. For her, even her own blood is just a tool and weapon for her rule. Completely ignoring the different looks of the people around her, Charlotte Katakuri came to the two tombstones, knelt on one knee, and carefully placed the bloody flowers in her hand on the ground. "Have you found out who did it?" he said coldly with an expressionless face. No one answered. Katakuri's eyes turned cold. Boom! A majestic momentum suddenly burst out from his body, sweeping out like a substance. Howang Hockey. The members of the big katakana middle.mom pirates present were shocked, and some of those who were not so determined even knelt on the ground with a bang, their faces pale and gasping for breath. I said, "Have you found out who did it?" Katakuri said word by word. Each word was chilling, like a cold nail, piercing people's hearts. "No, I don't know. It was Mom, who notified us to recover the body. Only Mom knows. But we don't dare to ask," someone said in a trembling voice. Katakuri frowned and put away his momentum. The strong wind suddenly stopped, and all the strange phenomena around disappeared instantly. He stood up slowly, his eyes swept across the faces of everyone present. For 3 days, all entertainment activities on all islands in the 10,000 nations will be suspended to mourn for Perospero and Daifuku. In addition, I don't want to see any of you coveting their positions and jurisdictions. Everything must be decided by Mom. Do you understand? After saying that, Katakuri turned around and left without even looking at the faces of others. With a bloody smell on his body, he quickly arrived at the gate of the cake castle. Raising his hand to stop the guards from calling, Katakuri looked at the cake castle expressionlessly, and suddenly knelt heavily on one knee with a bang, bowed his head and said, "Mom, I want to know who killed them." There was a silence. Katakuri gritted his teeth, and suddenly knocked his head heavily to the ground. Suddenly cracks appeared on the ground, and blood dripped from Katakuri's forehead, which frightened the guards. "Mom, please tell me." He was still silent in response. The long silence was deafening. Katakuri finally couldn't hold back his anger. He had always had a good relationship with Perospero, and the two of them jointly maintained the unstable rule of the 10,000 kingdoms. And Daifuku was his brother, a blood relative from the same father and mother. The death of the two was undoubtedly a fatal blow to Katakuri, who attached great importance to family and blood ties. His eyes were filled with dense bloodshot, and his hands in black leather gloves clenched tightly. The surrounding environment suddenly underwent extremely strange changes. The earth, walls, buildings, sculptures, street lights, all dead things seemed to come alive in an instant, turning into twisted glutinous balls that kept stretching, like countless long snakes dancing wildly. The guards had never seen such a strange scene before. They were horrified and retreated subconsciously. "Mom, please tell me." Katakuri raised his hand with red eyes. The moment the domineering aura burst out, the sticky ball surged up like a tide. But at this moment, you are worthy of being my most trusted son. You have successfully awakened the devil fruit. A hoarse female voice came out from the depths of the castle, with undisguised admiration in her tone. But the next sentence was a change of tone, and the tone was instantly stern. "But your performance, do you want to attack me?" A domineering aura far stronger than Katakuri's crushed out, and the guards fainted directly like a real air wave, and cracks appeared on the walls of the castle. Katakuri's pupils shook. The overwhelming pressure made him kneel on one knee with a bang. Everything in front of him seemed to become blurred and shattered like a mirror. But he still gritted his teeth and forced himself to support his body, with his back straight. "No." Katakuri's eyes were bloodshot. "I just want to avenge Daifuku and the others. The dignity of the Charlotte family cannot be violated by outsiders." The domineering aura suddenly disappeared. Katakuri only felt his body suddenly loosen up, kneeling there gasping for breath, sweating like rain. Squeaky. The heavy castle gate slowly opened. Big katakana middle.mom sat on a throne, her long legs in pink high leather boots crossed, one hand lazily supporting her cheek, looking at Katakuri kneeling there with a smile. "No, Rogers Darren is not an outsider." Charlotte Lingling's red lips slightly lifted, smiling charmingly. "He will be my 27th husband. In other words, he will be your father." Katakuri was stunned. Then his eyeballs bulged, and hideous bloodshot filled them. His fists were clenched very tightly. I ask for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 235, Playing House. New World. Moby Dick. Ha ha ha, what do you think, Newgate? This is a perfect plan, isn't it? Golden Lion stared at the tall man sitting in the main seat in front of him, his eyes full of ferocity and cunning, and he opened his arms and grinned. It's time to let the little devils of this sea see the horror of real pirates again. Marco and other members of the Whitebeard pirates stood there in shock, their faces pale, and their hearts were in turmoil. They couldn't believe what they heard. This guy actually planned such a crazy plan. Is he crazy? Golden Lion ignored their eyes directly. For him, other people's opinions are meaningless. What do you think? We haven't joined forces for a long time. I miss the time when we were, fighting side by side, on the same ship. Golden Lion smiled sinisterly. That was really a beautiful memory. Whitebeard frowned. He took a sip from the huge wine jar, then said expressionlessly. Are you done? I've finished a bottle of wine, you should leave, Shaki. Golden Lion was stunned. A flash of anger flashed in his eyes. What do you mean? Whitebeard said calmly. I have no interest in your plan, and I don't want to start a war with the Navy rashly. If you want to do this kind of thing, do it yourself. He glanced at Kazuki Odin. He will avenge Odin himself. This is his choice. None of us will interfere. Otherwise, it will be the greatest insult to his dignity as a samurai. As for the friendship you mentioned. Whitebeard's eyes suddenly turned cold. If I remember correctly, we never had any friendship when we were on the same ship. I'm tired of the days of being on guard against being stabbed in the back by other companions. While speaking, he glanced at Marco and other crew members with the corner of his eyes, and a touch of tenderness flashed in the depths of his eyes. Golden Lion narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have noticed the look in Whitebeard's eyes when he looked at his own crew members. I see. His eyes rolled with a sinister smile, and his tone was sarcastic. This is really a pity, Newgate. I had high hopes for you, but now I didn't expect you to fall to this point. It's such a pity. You, who have such a strong fighting power, actually want to play such a childish game of house in this sea of hegemony. Ha ha ha. The figure of the Golden Lion gradually floated up from the original place, flew into the air, and looked down at the people on the deck of the Moby Dick. You just play house hypocritically like this. Do you think that if you don't cause trouble to the Navy will not cause trouble to you? Ha 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 ha. It's really stupid. Too naive. This world is ultimately a world of the survival of the fittest. His eyes crossed the long distance and stared at the careless Whitebeard. Newgate, I originally thought that you and I were the same ambitious people. But now it seems that we can only drift apart. When the real war begins, I want to see if you can still protect the group of little ghosts behind you like you do now. Ha 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 ha. As soon as the voice fell, the figure of the Golden Lion suddenly soared up and soon disappeared in the distant sky. Leaving the Whitebeard with a solemn face sitting there, silent for a long time. A few days later. North Sea. Bang. A military boot hit the flying squirrel's face heavily, and the exaggerated inhuman force directly kicked him out. Circles of white air waves exploded in the void, and the figure of the flying squirrel directly smashed more than a dozen towering trees before sinking deeply into the bottom of a mountain range. The aftermath of the mighty force suddenly spread, and the entire mountain seemed to tremble, and long cracks appeared on the rock wall at the bottom. Dust rose up, and the sound of the flying squirrel coughing violently continued to be heard. You damn bastard, how many times have I told you not to hit your face? In the hole in the rock wall, the flying squirrel wearing seastone shackles struggled to climb out of it, with a bruised face and blood oozing from the corners of his mouth. Not far away, Darren's figure floated down from the sky and landed steadily. He smiled and said, "If you don't want to be slapped in the face by me, just dodge it." The corner of the flying squirrel's mouth twitched, and he wanted to curse in his heart. It's good enough that I can barely maintain normal activities while wearing these seastone shackles. But he was too lazy to argue. After all, he would be beaten whether he argued or not, so he might as well save his energy. The flying squirrel sat on the ground with his buttocks, without the manners and majesty of the North Sea admiral, lying there with his legs spread out, gasping for breath. Not working again. Seeing his deputy lying there like he was played, Darren teased with some evil taste. It must be said that the flying squirrel's talent is indeed quite good. In just a few days, this guy has adapted to the suppression of the seastone. Even when facing his own attacks, he can occasionally do some subconscious blocking and evasive actions. Well, although it was still a crushing beating in the end, he was able to struggle a little. Why don't you go back to the headquarters? Is there nothing to do there? The flying squirrel complained unhappily. Darren smiled and shrugged. Although there are indeed many credits to be taken, there is still enough time. Besides, compared to cultural courses, I still think that helping the adjutant's training is much more important. You are addicted to beating me. The flying squirrel rolled his eyes weakly. Okay, today's beating. No, today's seastone confrontation training ends here. Darren said, and then summoned a metal skateboard, stepped on it, and under the effect of the magnetic field, it soared into the sky and disappeared into the clouds. Flying squirrel. You let it slip. Lubeck Island. Don Quixote family, resident hall. Doflamingo, Treble and other cadres are meeting in the meeting hall to discuss the next step of future development. Who is it? Doflamingo's eyes suddenly turned cold, and his 5 fingers bent like chicken claws, and he swung them heavily in a certain direction. Swish. Sharp cutting marks suddenly appeared on the walls and the ground of the meeting hall. A tall figure walked out slowly from the darkness, and at this time he was tightly holding several sharp invisible threads with one hand, and sparks splashed on his skin. He smiled and looked at Doflamingo. "Dof, I haven't seen you for a while, and your strength has improved a lot." Seeing the visitor, Doflamingo's face changed. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and knelt on one knee. The proud head drooped slightly. Meet the Godfather. Please be grateful for everything. Chapter 236 Father's Feeling. Seeing this, Treble and others exchanged glances with each other, then knelt on one knee on the ground, bowed their heads and said in unison. Meet Godfather Darren. They had no choice but to bow their heads. The man in front of them annihilated the monsters of the fleet under the command of the legendary pirate Golden Lion with his own strength. Especially at this moment, the terrifying aura faintly emanating from Darren made them tremble with fear. No matter how proud a person is, no matter what the North Sea underworld giant is, he is as humble as an ant in front of absolute strength. In the huge meeting hall, no one stood except Darren. A satisfied smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Very good, I admire people who know the rules. Darren walked over slowly and stretched out his hand for Doflamingo to kiss the back of his hand. You all know that I've been busy recently and rarely come back to Beihai. But now it seems that you have done a good job and managed the underground world of Beihai in an orderly manner. I am very satisfied with this. Everyone stood up with some fear. Darren sat casually on the soft leather sofa, lit a gold-plated cigar for himself, and looked at Doflamingo sitting opposite him. After not seeing each other for more than half a year, Doflamingo has grown up a lot. Compared to the little boy when he first came to Beihai, Doflamingo has now grown into a young man. Some messy short blonde hair is like a crown, the facial lines are sharp, and the height is close to 1.8 meters. There is a kind of domineering and gloomy in his eyebrows, the dark emperor of the future world. And in the perception of the observation hockey, the boy's aura has also become much stronger. Darren was a little emotional about this. It must be admitted that Doflamingo is indeed the son of heaven. In terms of talent alone, he is definitely far superior to the flying squirrel. If he hadn't given the thunder fruit to the flying squirrel, it would have been extremely difficult for him to suppress the ambitious Doflamingo in the North Sea. You know, the flying squirrel has his own teachings and guidance. And what about Doflamingo? He only has a group of crooked people like Treble who can only flatter him around him. He can develop the string fruit to this extent simply by relying on his own exploration, which is enough to show his extraordinary talent. Godfather, you came back to the North Sea this time, is While Darren was looking at Doflamingo, the latter was also carefully trying to figure out the latter's thoughts, and asked tentatively. Darren smiled and said, "Can't you come back to see my godson if you have nothing to do?" He blew out a smoke ring from his mouth and sighed with some emotion. "To be honest, Doflamingo, as your godfather, I am indeed not very competent. And my teaching to you is far from enough. This time, in addition to dealing with some military affairs of the North Sea Fleet, I came back to the North Sea Fleet. In addition to my duties, I just want to make up for my regrets." When these words came out, everyone present was stunned. Doflamingo said doubtfully, "Godfather, you mean, you want to guide my practice?" Darren said helplessly, "Yes, as my godson, if you are too weak, it will make me look incompetent." 10 days passed quickly. One day. A deserted island in the North Sea. Two figures glided quickly in the sky one after the other. "That's it, use silk threads to hook the clouds and pull your body, so that you can have the ability to fly in the sky." Darren, who was standing on a streamlined metal skateboard, put his hands in his pockets, and his figure quickly retreated, teaching Doflamingo with ease. "Try to keep your body balanced as much as possible, otherwise you will reveal a flaw to the enemy at the time when the line alternates with the line." Darren had a smile on his face, watching Doflamingo's slightly clumsy movements with interest. Compared to Darren's extremely flexible movements in the sky, Doflamingo's movements seemed more rigid, his figure stumbled, and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. What an amazing talent! He basically mastered the air path in less than an hour. Darren squinted and observed Doflamingo's movements. As time went by, he gradually found that the latter's skills became more and more proficient, so he hooked his finger. Swish! A silver cold light suddenly whizzed from the distant sky and shot towards Doflamingo. Doflamingo's pupils suddenly shrank. Feeling a sense of crisis, he subconsciously swung a claw. Kang! Several transparent silk threads tightly intercepted a silver-white long sword, and the two collided to produce a large number of sparks. "This is..." Darren smiled and said. "From now on, we will increase the difficulty." As soon as the voice fell, Liang Kuei Dao Shouhai suddenly disappeared, turning into sword shadows all over the sky, densely covering Doflamingo. Doflamingo's face changed drastically, and his movements sped up a bit. While he flicked out invisible silk threads from his fingers to pull the floating white clouds, moving in the sky like a swing, he also had to deal with the sharp swords that shot from various weird angles from time to time, and the pressure suddenly increased. Colin's attack was too swift, and soon Doflamingo's body surface had more and more the wound cut by the sharp sword. The gushing blood dyed the white shirt and pink feather coat red. On the island, Torebel and others looked at their young master injured in shock, anxious, but they could do nothing but stare. In their hearts, they could only pray that the King of the North Sea could control the strength well, instead of taking the opportunity to guide the training and find a reason to, accidentally, kill their young master. "What's wrong, Dov? Is this all you can do?" Darren leisurely lit a cigar, put it in his pocket and looked at the blond young man who was trapped in a dead end, deliberately mocking. "Passive beating is not your style. I'm standing here now, or can you not even beat my knife?" Doflamingo's eyes suddenly turned red under his sunglasses, and he gritted his teeth and roared. "Damn it, shut up." A large piece of silk thread spread out in his hand like a spider web, enclosing the oncoming sharp sword and binding it tightly. The next moment, Doflamingo pulled the silk thread violently, and with his feather coat flying, his figure suddenly shot out from his original position and arrived above Darren in the blink of an eye. "I am Doflamingo." 5 fingers slashed down fiercely. "Take the rogue line." Swish. 5 extremely sharp silk threads pierced Darren's skin directly and got deeply stuck in his steel-like muscles. Several drops of blood splashed up and fell on Darren's face. He finally laughed. "Very good, I can finally break my physical defense." A thick white smoke came out of his mouth, and the figure of the Commodore disappeared like a ghost. Doflamingo was stunned. Before he could react, a black military boot had been infinitely enlarged in the reflection of his pupil. Boom! Doflamingo fell into the island like a cannonball, blasting a shocking hole. Dover. Are you okay? Young master. Treybole and the others ran over with pale faces, trying to help Doflamingo, who was covered in blood, but the latter shook his hand away. The bruised and battered celestial dragon boy knelt in the deep pit, panting heavily, looking up at the tall figure falling from the sky, blood dripping from his body. The man walked towards him step by step. The tall and majestic figure seemed to cover the sun, and the huge shadow enveloped Doflamingo. He slowly stretched out his hand. Looking at the hand slowly reaching out to him, a trace of fear flashed in Doflamingo's eyes under his sunglasses. The hand gently rubbed his hair. Doflamingo was stunned. You grow up very fast, you really deserve to be my proud godson, Dover. The man smiled and said. Keep growing, become stronger. Only when you become strong enough. Can you kill me, right? After saying this, before Doflamingo could react, Darren stepped on the skateboard, his figure whizzed up, and disappeared into the distant sky in the blink of an eye. The deserted island suddenly became deathly silent. Dover. Torvald looked at Doflamingo, who was kneeling there in a daze, cautiously, and tried to speak. Doflamingo's eyes were dazed for a moment, and he came back to his senses in an instant. He supported his knees with difficulty and stood up from the ground. A trace of blood slid down from his forehead and gathered at his chin. But he still stared blankly at the direction where Darren disappeared in the distant sky. You say, that guy taught me so patiently and helped me improve my strength, what on earth was it for? Doflamingo clenched his fist unconsciously. In just 10 days, Darren's teaching was better than his training in the past 6 months. And it is certain that the man did not hide anything. He really spared no effort to help me develop devil fruits, improve close combat skills, and even some secret training methods in the Marine training camp, which he generously taught me. Doesn't he know that I always want to kill him? Doflamingo's eyes were full of confusion and bewilderment. Treybole and the others fell silent upon hearing this. As bystanders, they saw clearly the progress of their young master in the past few days. To be honest, they didn't know why the man did this. Forget it, let's go back. Doflamingo shook his head, regaining his former coldness and majesty, and said lightly. But I don't know if it's an illusion. Deep in his heart, even he himself is unwilling to admit that. When the man ruffled his hair, he actually felt a kind of warmth and support from his cowardly and incompetent biological father. He had never felt before. I ask for everything, thank you very much. Chapter 237 Love is Needed. After finishing the training of Doflamingo, Darren returned to the North Sea 321 branch. As soon as he walked into the base director's office, the flying squirrel who was busy processing documents said helplessly. Why are you here again? Darren sat on the soft leather sofa with a boss's demeanor, lit a cigarette and smiled. What's wrong, don't you welcome me? The corner of the flying squirrel's mouth twitched. After a few days of peaceful life, Darren came back again. It's not that he is not welcome, but your special training is too abnormal. He asked unhappily. Did you torture Doflamingo badly? Darren poured himself a glass of whiskey, but couldn't find ice cubes. He suddenly missed Kuzan, the hot-blooded guy. After all, whiskey still needs ice cubes. At room temperature, it is just like a certain drink, like horse urine. Well, I guess so. I guided his practice. The flying squirrel glanced at him and suddenly became interested. You haven't given up yet. Flying Squirrel was very clear about Darren's intention to train Doflamingo. Although he did not understand Darren's behavior similar to raising a tiger to cause trouble, he always respected Darren's decision. Doflamingo is a rare talent. Facts have proved that it is also a wise choice for me to hand over the underground world of the North Sea to him. Darren smiled and said. He is still a child, don't be too harsh on him. Flying Squirrel frowned and said in a deep voice. I am afraid that you will get out of control in the end. That guy doesn't look like someone who is willing to be under someone else no matter how you look at it. He hesitated for a moment and then said. Do you know what the final outcome of those mafia bosses he cleaned up was? He used the power of the devil fruit to control them, and then locked him and his subordinates up, letting them kill each other. Only the one who fought to the end could survive. The flying squirrel sighed. This is what he was worried about. The character of this kid Doflamingo is very twisted. The world's noble celestial dragons are born with superior blood, which makes him arrogant and arrogant. The childhood trauma makes this arrogance turn into morbid paranoia. He does not allow anyone to step on his head. The morbid paranoia will give birth to hatred and anger, and finally turn into a twisted desire for destruction. The pure desire for destruction and malice led him to ignore life, treat everything as a game, and take destroying other people's dreams and hurting other people's lives as the greatest pleasure. Hearing the reminder of the flying squirrel, Darren paused thoughtfully. After pondering for a few seconds, he slowly said, "Flying squirrel, do you know? Behind all the obsessions of adults, they are actually making up for their childhood debts." To put it bluntly, what Doflamingo did was just that he was a bad kid trying to get attention. In the original plot, he seized Tenjojin to seize the position of Shichibukai, stole the Dressrosa regime, became the largest intermediary in the underground world, and even cooperated with Kaido to produce artificial devil fruits and exported wars crazily around the world. All his actions were just an attempt to gain the attention of the world government, or more accurately, the Celestial Dragons, to prove the decision of the Celestial Dragons to drive him out of the holy land of Marihoa was a mistake. Open your eyes and see, since you are unwilling to accept me as a Celestial Dragon again, I will destroy the world you rule. This is what Doflamingo thinks. I will not comment on what he did, but the means to deal with the enemy must be as fierce as wildfire. Darren's mouth curled up slightly, and a puff of smoke came out of his mouth. To put it bluntly, he is just a childish and naive kid who has a strong sense of revenge because of his excessive pride. Being suppressed by you and me with our powerful strength, he must have a place to vent his inner anger. At least he is very disciplined and did not attack civilians, right? The flying squirrel pinched his temples and said with a headache, I am afraid that if something happens to you one day, he will completely lose control. Doflamingo does not look like a person who will succumb to power. Darren nodded in agreement and said with a smile, of course, to deal with such a kid, stick education alone is far from enough. Perhaps using absolute strength can make him afraid and suppress him, but he will still be unwilling to accept it in his heart. He will only hide his hatred for you deeper, like a poisonous snake hidden in the dark, waiting to bite you hard when you are caught off guard. If you want to truly conquer Doflamingo's heart, you can't just use fists. Then what else can you do? The flying squirrel asked doubtfully. Darren smiled meaningfully. You need love. Flying squirrel. He looked at Darren in confusion. After a long time, he muffled a sentence. Doflamingo is not a woman. Darren. He rolled his eyes. I always feel that flying squirrel is becoming more and more sultry. Sure enough, sitting in the position of North Sea Admiral, there are too many banquets and social events, which makes him mature a lot. I mean Doflamingo lacks love very much. Darren said unhappily. In your opinion, what is Doflamingo's biggest weakness? For more novels 148,370 join. Flying Squirrel shook his head. There was an inexplicable meaning in Darren's eyes. His biggest weakness is his dead biological father. He hates his biological father, hates his incompetence, hates his naivety. He lacked the love of his father since he was a child, and deep in his heart he actually longs for a father who is powerful, famous, and amazing. He needs a strong father to give him love, care and guidance, and give him enough recognition. He will stroke his hair and praise him, "You are doing great," when he makes progress, and will pat his shoulder and say, "It's okay, I am here," when he encounters setbacks. He is extremely eager for such an identity to appear. Hearing Darren's words, the flying squirrel was thoughtful. After a moment, he looked at Darren deeply and smiled bitterly. You are a devil. Really? Darren smiled disapprovingly. I am taking on the responsibility of a godfather, caring for weak orphans, and helping a psychologically twisted young man onto the right path. Some places call people like me angels. Flying squirrel. Really shameless. Okay, I have to go back. After smoking a cigarette, Darren extinguished the cigarette butt, drank the whiskey, stood up from the sofa, and walked towards the office door. When he opened the door, Darren paused. I'll leave the North Sea to you, Flying Squirrel. Flying Squirrel didn't say anything. Just stood up suddenly, raised his hand solemnly, and saluted. Please thank you for everything. Chapter 238. You are so beautiful today. When Darren rushed back to the Navy headquarters from the North Sea, it was already very dark. With his knowledge of the headquarters sentry posts and defense intelligence, Darren easily avoided the searchlights of the watchtowers and cruise warships, bypassed the patrolling naval guards, and quietly entered Marineford. It was not that he wanted to do something sneaky, but he was just too lazy to bother. While flying towards the family compound on the metal skateboard, Darren suddenly remembered something and turned around to fly towards Guillaume's home. No other meaning, just to visit his former subordinates. Accompanied by a gentle and moving low hum. Under the moonlight projected in from the window, it flickered with an alluring luster. A hearty battle. Guillaume lay on Darren's chest, her slightly opened red lips exhaling fragrance, her long black hair messily sticking to her sweaty neck and shoulders. You bastard. You came here in the middle of the night to bully me. Looking at Darren's half-smile, Guillaume snorted lightly, anger flashed in his eyes, and glared at him fiercely. Darren smiled mischievously. I understand, so you want me to go home. If that's the case, then I have no choice but to go back. He was about to get up and put on his clothes. No. A sense of panic surged into Guillaume's heart. She reached out and grabbed Darren's clothes, but her proud character did not allow her to look Darren in the eye. She just turned her head away and whispered sullenly. You, don't go back. When Guillaume thought about what would happen after this guy went home, she didn't know what kind of feeling she had in her heart. And most importantly, every time this happened, Darren, the bastard, would just pull up his pants and leave, without any time for tenderness. This made Guillaume feel a sense of emptiness and loss in his heart. I always felt that I was taken advantage of for nothing. Ah, what did you say? I didn't hear it clearly. Darren said with interest, pretending not to hear it. Guillaume bit her red lips with her pearly teeth, suddenly pushed Darren hard, and said fiercely. Then get out of here. Don't come to me again. Her delicate eyes immediately turned red, with tears. But the next second, she felt a pair of warm hands holding her in an embrace. The damn voice of the Navy scum came to her ears. I won't go home tonight, I'll stay here with you. Guillaume's delicate body trembled, but she didn't speak. She didn't push Darren away. The cold and gentle moonlight outside the window projected in, and the room seemed quiet and peaceful. So, you haven't been home this time. Guillaume suddenly broke the silence, speaking in a faint voice. Darren hugged Guillaume, feeling the smooth touch on his palm, and couldn't help laughing. Yes, I came to you as soon as I returned to the headquarters. He naturally knew what Guillaume was thinking. In the past, he would run away after finishing the job, which did give him a feeling of getting something for free. Although Guillaume didn't say anything on the surface due to his Sunere personality, Darren could still sense that he was unhappy. So this time when he came back, Darren thought about it and decided to accompany Guillaume for one night. Sometimes he also felt a headache, and having too many female confidants was not necessarily a good thing. Unlike the carefreeness of Beihai Shi, who was just playing around and purely exploring the mysteries of the body, Guillaume and Shi were both innocent, heartfelt. To be honest, this feeling was quite subtle for Darren, a scumbag. Hearing Darren's answer, Guillaume, who was nestled in Darren's arms, resisted the shame of being harassed by that hand, and showed a triumphant smile on his face. HMPH. Feeling the warmth and thickness, chest, and the fatigue after the fierce battle, Guillaume gradually closed his heavy eyelids, enjoying this rare peace, and soon fell asleep. Listening to Guillaume's even breathing, Darren smiled. He suddenly saw the rose on the windowsill. The rose made of gold foil, inserted in an exquisite white porcelain vase, and dotted with some baby's breath next to it, was obviously carefully cared for by its owner. It looked beautiful under the moonlight. Asshole. Don't always bully me. The girl in his arms suddenly twisted her body and made unconscious sleep talk. Darren was stunned, and his eyes gradually became soft. Early the next morning, Darren sneaked out of Guillaume's family compound, and after a circle, he stepped into the naval port of the Navy headquarters in front of everyone. It's Commodore Darren. Commodore Darren is back. Good morning, Commodore Darren. After greeting the patrolling Navy soldiers in a friendly manner, Darren bought some breakfast at a roadside shop and walked slowly towards home. On the other side, Guillaume hurriedly cleaned up the messy battlefield, changed into a brand new military uniform, walked out of the door heroically, and went to Vice Admiral Suru's home. At this time every week, she would visit Staff Officer Suru's home, say a few words, and then go to the training camp for class. She slept well last night, so she was in a good mood. Sister Suru. As soon as she entered Vice Admiral Suru's yard, she saw the former sitting under the shade of a tree wearing reading glasses and flipping through documents. I'm here, Guillaume. Staff Officer Suru closed the document, looked up at Guillaume, and said with a kind smile. Good morning, Guillaume. At this time, a flattering voice with a duck voice suddenly sounded from outside the door, and Kaji was standing there, looking at Guillaume with a smile, holding a few breakfasts in his hands. Kaji. Guillaume was stunned, and then a faint smile appeared on his face. Good morning. As if because of her good mood, Guillaume's eyebrows were not as cold as usual, but gentle in her smile. She stood in the bright sunshine in the morning, and her whole body was bright and beautiful. Her black hair was blown by the breeze, fluttering gently, as beautiful as a thorny rose in full bloom. Kaji was stunned for a moment. He had never seen such a beautiful Guillaume, especially when she smiled. It was like melting ice and snow, brilliant and dazzling. At this moment, Kaji shouted wildly in his heart. Guillaume smiled at me. It must be because I shaved today, so I look so handsome. But he didn't know that someone had shown a graceful and charming posture last night. Kaji had an old face. Her face flushed red, and she stammered. Guillaume, you are more beautiful today than before. Really? Guillaume thought for a moment, as if she remembered some beautiful scene, and smiled generously. Thank you. Staff Officer Crane beside her shook his head and couldn't help but cast a pitying look at Kaji. The girl's eyes were full of spring and joy, and she, a veteran, could see it at a glance. I'm completely addicted, that bastard Darren. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 239 Garp's new target. Staff Officer Crane sighed in his heart. Kaji grew up under her care. Although he looked a little ugly, he was a good guy in general. As for Guillaume's choice, she knew that she couldn't interfere too much, and she didn't have the heart to blame him. Who doesn't have a young time? Compared to the powerful, resourceful, and charming Navy monster, although Kaji is also a genius, he is indeed inferior. Everyone admires excellent and outstanding opposite sex, which is human nature. It is too unlucky for Kaji to be the only one. However, Staff Officer Suru thought of Kaji's behavior of caring for women, and romantic street discussions, every day, and the regret in his heart disappeared instantly. Ding-ling-a-ling. As the bell rang, bursts of painful wails suddenly rang out in the cultural classroom of the training camp. Stop writing, and hand in your papers. Spider ghost, put away your hair. If you don't know, you don't know. It's useless to use so many arms to write. And you are burning the mountain. It's just an exam. Why are you so worried? Look at the pile of cigarette ash on your desk. Kaji, what are you looking at? If you look again, I will dig out your eyes. Kuzan, don't sleep. Hand in your papers. Zephyr, standing on the podium, looked at the students below in silence and covered his forehead in pain. This group of bastards don't listen to the class and study hard, but they are full of tricks when it comes to exams. Zephyr pinched his temples and looked at the papers handed in by the students one by one, frowning. He kept flipping through the thick stack of papers, his eyebrows knitted tighter and tighter, and his face became darker and darker. Kuzan handed in a blank paper directly. Jaji's handwriting is like his personality, crooked and unclear, and he copied other people's answers incorrectly. Ghost Spider's answer sheet is okay, and Huo Xiaoshan's is just average. Guion, as always, showed her excellent performance, with beautiful handwriting, clear and regular, and logical analysis of the answers, which makes people feel pleasing to the eye at first glance. By the way, where is Darren's answer sheet? Zepha suddenly remembered something and searched through the pile of test papers. This bad boy skips classes every day. If he doesn't do well in the cultural subjects, I will have to teach him a lesson. While mumbling, he quickly found Darren's answer sheet. But when he saw the answers on the test paper, his eyes suddenly lit up. He looked stunned and couldn't help muttering. This kid is really a genius. Hey Darren, how did you do on the test? The test questions are so difficult that I couldn't help falling asleep after just one look. As soon as he walked out of the examination room, Kuzan looked very familiar, warmly put his arm around Darren's shoulders, and said with a smile. Darren's mouth twitched. I know, I heard your snoring. Ha 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 ha, loud, right. Kuzan laughed proudly without any embarrassment. This hot-blooded guy. Darren had a few black lines on his forehead. The cultural test questions are actually not difficult, and most of the knowledge is just a rough entry-level category. After all, the focus of training officers in the training camp is to improve their actual combat level, not their cultural literacy. As a time traveler, Darren has experienced the baptism of the sea of questions. Although he was not a top student before the time travel, he was more than enough to cope with the military examination with limited cultural level. By the way, you haven't been back for more than 10 days. Mr. Garp asked you to go over. While walking towards the family compound, Kuzan suddenly patted his head, as if he finally remembered something, and said, Vice Admiral Garp. Darren thought about it and nodded in agreement. When confronting the Golden Lion Shiki head-on on Coin Island, he vaguely caught the feeling of Garp's punch, and then he blocked the Golden Lion's knife dangerously. Although this is inseparable from his abnormal physical defense and armed color domineering, it also indirectly confirms Garp's incomparable strength. Just learning some fur can make his strength rise to a level and face the legendary pirate Golden Lion. It is hard to imagine how powerful I would be if I really learned all of Garp's skills and combined them with my own inhuman strength and physique. Well, at least I won't be stabbed. A few minutes later, Darren and Kuzan the two came to the port full of waste materials and warships. As soon as he stepped into this long-abandoned port, Darren saw the wreckage of warships piled all over the ground. Small and medium-sized warships were scattered on the ground, as if they were torn and crushed into pieces by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. The scene was extremely scary. Compared to the last time he came, the number of abandoned warships in this port has been reduced by at least a quarter. No need to think about it, this is the result of Kuzan and Garp's practice during this period. You have been quite lively during this period. Darren couldn't help but sigh. Although Kuzan slept late in class and was lazy and unfocused on many things except for fighting and conquering pirates, he was never vague in practice. The same is true for Garp. Even Darren suspected that this old man was unwilling to be promoted to admiral, in addition to not wanting to protect the disgusting celestial dragons, to a large extent, in order to gain more free time. On the one hand, he could allocate more time and energy to practice without having to deal with military affairs. On the other hand, of course, they chased Roger all over the sea. Of course. Kuzan clenched his fists and said excitedly. If I don't work harder, I will be left further and further behind by you. Darren smiled. You are all here. At this time, a low voice with a smile came from behind. Darren and Kuzan turned around and saluted Cap, who was walking slowly with a dog-head military cap. Vice Admiral Garp. *2. Garp waved his hand, found a place to sit down, smiled and looked at Darren and said. Darren, I heard from Sengoku that you used the moves I taught you when you fought with Shiki this time. Darren nodded and shook his head and said. It's just some fur. I feel there is still a long way to go before I can really master it. Garp laughed and said. That's already very good. After all, not everyone can learn my moves. He proudly put his hands on his waist. Tell me, if you have any questions about training, I will answer them one by one. I'm going to sea soon, and time is limited. Darren was stunned and asked subconsciously. Is there any news about the Roger pirates? The Roger pirates have disappeared in the past 6 months, and no intelligence has been released. This sea is too vast, especially for an elite pirate group like Roger's pirates. As long as they don't do anything earth-shattering, it will be extremely difficult for even the Navy headquarters to find their whereabouts. No, there is no news from Roger yet. I don't know what that guy is doing recently. Garp shook his head, with a solemn look in his eyes. The target this time is Bereric Redfield. Please be grateful for everything. Chapter 240 King of Alliance. Hearing this well-known name, Darren and Kuzan were both stunned, and their pupils suddenly shrank. Bereric Redfield. Nicknamed, the Lone Red, and the Red Count, he is one of the legendary pirates, with extremely powerful strength, and is known as a man who can, alone, and can keep pace with Roger and Whitebeard. Although the above comment came from Sengoku, who has always been suspected of exaggerating his opponents, this is enough to prove Redfield's strength. After all, Darren clearly remembers that Redfield has a real record. Before the Great Pirate Era began, he had fought with Admiral Steelbone Sora of the Navy headquarters for 10 days and nights, and won with one move. In the end, he was picked up by Garp, who arrived late at the scene because of exhaustion, and was sent to the 6th floor of the Infinite Hell and impelled down and imprisoned. It was precisely because of this record that Garp inexplicably got the title of Picking Up the Leak King, or Cooperation King. It seems that this is the battle where Lone Red was defeated in the original plot. This thought flashed through Darren's mind, and he quickly calmed down. But then again, Garp's title of Cooperation King is not completely unreasonable. Throughout the life of this bad old man, all his brilliant achievements were more or less achieved by joining forces. In the Battle of God Valley, Garp in his youth joined forces with Roger, a rookie pirate, to defeat the Rocks pirates, thus earning the title of hero. In the battle between Steel Bone Kong and Red Earl, Garp joined forces with Steel Bone Kong and successfully picked up the leak, establishing the reputation of the strongest navy. Later, when Golden Lion went crazy and broke into Marineford alone, Garp and Sengoku joined forces to defeat Golden Lion and locked him up and impel down. With the blessing of the joint forces buff, Garp was invincible and unstoppable. When he went to Beehive Island alone to save his apprentice Kobe, he was stabbed by Shiryu with a knife, and finally his life or death was unknown. This is not right no matter how you look at it. It seems that the title of King of Alliance makes sense. Darren touched the green stubble on his chin, and looked at Garp with a strange look in his eyes. Before he could speak, Kuzan beside him suddenly screamed, which scared Darren. "I'm ready, Mr. Garp." Darren turned his head with a twitch in his mouth, and saw Kuzan's face flushed with excitement, his hands clenched into fists, and his whole body trembled. "After this period of training, I have learned all the courses in the training camp and have mastered the practice of domineering. I am ready to defeat the pirates and fight the evil to the end." 2 lines of white smoke came out of his nostrils. He stood up straight, bowed deeply to Garp, and said loudly, "Please take me with you." Darren, this guy is really positive. While complaining, Darren was also shocked by Kuzan's progress. He is worthy of being called a monster. One of the 3 generals. In the future, he has mastered domineering in just half a year. And from the breath he exudes, he is not inferior to the elite vice admiral of the headquarters. It is estimated that the development of the Devil Fruit ability has also been greatly improved. This talent is also amazing. Ha 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 ha, you are worthy of being my disciple, very energetic. Garp smiled at Kuzan with satisfaction. But, you won't be needed this time. Redfield is a lone ranger. He doesn't have any fleets or pirate groups under his command. That means if I take you with me, you will have to face him directly. In the end, I may have to protect you. He raised his hand and patted Kuzan's shoulder, smiling. You are the future of the Navy. There can't be any accidents or mistakes. Otherwise, that bastard Zephyr will cause trouble for me. Before, Sengoku approached Darren several times because Darren's Devil Fruit ability just happened to restrain the mission target. He never planned to let Darren go to a head-on confrontation, so Zephyr, who was protecting his son, agreed. But no one expected that Darren would always mix in strange factors during every mission, which led to him having to face the pirates head-on in the end. Damn it! Hearing Garp's words, Kuzan waved his fist with regret on his face and became dejected. Come on, Darren, we haven't had a hearty duel for a long time. In the abandoned port, Kuzan set up his formation, staring at Darren with his eyes burning, his fighting spirit rising like a flame. Darren scratched his head helplessly. After briefly instructing them on their training, Garp hurriedly boarded the warship and went out to sea. According to him, the latest intelligence shows that Admiral Steel Bone Kong has contacted Redfield and the battle has officially broken out. Garp must go to support as soon as possible. As soon as Garp left, Kuzan couldn't wait to grab Darren, and the scene in front of him turned into this. Okay, I'm also curious about your current strength. Darren took a deep breath and made a move. Two sharp swords, one black and one silver, flew from a distance and hovered steadily beside Darren. Yanma, hunting the sea. Kuzan's eyes lit up immediately. You actually have an extra knife. His eyes lit up. This is simply too cool. In that case, I won't be polite. After the words fell, Kuzan raised his hand. The extremely cold ice condensed and spread from his arm, and in an instant, a huge ice bird waved its transparent wings, freezing everything in its path with a devastating attitude, and rushed towards Darren fiercely. Ice Cube, Violent Pheasant Beak. Kuzan had personally experienced the terrifying power of Darren's magnetic sword control, so he didn't dare to hide his weakness and used a big move at the beginning. In an instant, the extreme low temperature hit him, like a towering iceberg collapsing in front of him. Feeling the severe cold and oppression, Darren smiled. Kuzan's strength has indeed become much stronger. He hooked his finger. The two famous swords behind him were stained with black armed color domineering at the same time. Under the violent magnetic field, the famous swords trembled violently, and then exploded into circles of white air waves, like a rocket launcher. Boom! The two swords collided heavily with the ice bird, and the burst of air waves instantly dispersed everything around. As the sky was full of ice crystals flying and falling. Darren and Kuzan's figures broke through the ice curtain at the same time. Their fists were wrapped in strict domineering armor and hit each other's faces heavily. Bang! Bang! The two faces were hit hard at the same time, and blood splashed at the corners of their mouths. But their eyes were hot and bright, and they only paused for a second before stepping towards each other again. This is a passionate battle. I ask for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 241 Martial Law. Abandoned military port. The afterglow of the setting sun turned into a red glow, gradually infiltrating the distant sky and falling on the ground. At this time, the land of the military port had turned into a world of ice and snow, with crystal-clear ice crystals protruding from the ice surface and a faint white mist in the air. With a low bang, Darren and Kuzan's fists hit each other's faces at the same time, splashing blood foam, and the two staggered back, and then fell backwards to the ground at the same time. Hoo! The two lay on the snow-covered ground with their legs spread out, gasping for breath, their faces bloody and fleshy, blurred, bruised and swollen. Ha 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 ha. It's so refreshing. It turns out that only a duel with you can make people's blood boil. Kuzan didn't bother to wipe the blood off his face, and laughed wantonly, with sincere joy in his smile. It was a kind of joy of meeting a worthy opponent. Darren rolled his eyes unhappily, pulled his feet out of the ice, and the ice crystals around him shattered with a crackling sound. Your devil fruit ability restricts my actions too much, and it's boring to fight. But it can be seen that there is still a feeling of hearty satisfaction in his eyes. Kuzan turned his head and glanced at Darren, grinning. You held back, right? Darren did not comment. Kuzan is indeed a genius who has won the title of monster. His strength has undergone earth-shaking changes in the past 6 months, and he is many times stronger than when he first came to the training camp. Not only did he further develop the devil fruit to a higher level on the original basis, but he also mastered the domineering. Under Garp's teaching, his biggest weakness, close combat, was completely transformed. From the previous fight, Kuzan's strength has surpassed the elite vice admiral of the headquarters. Even so, compared with Darren, a freak with all-round strength, Kuzan still has a distance to catch up. But this is enough to shock Darren. It's really you, Darren. It seems that I have to practice harder. Kuzan saw that Darren did not deny it. Instead of being frustrated and lost, the light in his eyes became more and more blazing, and the flame of competition ignited in his heart. Darren smiled, just when he was about to speak. A sharp and piercing sound suddenly came from a distance. Quick, depressed, anxious and nervous. Darren and Kuzan's faces changed at the same time, and they sat up suddenly from the ground, looking solemnly in the direction of the military zone. This is the alarm of Marineford. What happened? With their eyesight, they could vaguely see that the cruise ships on the other side of the oval naval port were quickly returning to the port, and the dense footsteps of the Navy soldiers kept coming. Commodore Darren, Colonel Kuzan. At this time, a panicked figure ran into the abandoned naval port. It was a messenger. The young messenger saluted breathlessly and said in a deep voice. General Zongguo ordered that from now on, the internal part of the Navy headquarters in Marineford will officially enter a state of martial law. Please return to your respective family quarters as soon as possible and report the specific status in time. Ah, it seems that something extraordinary has happened. Can you tell me? Kuzan patted his butt and stood up from the ground, asking with a curious look. The messenger glanced at him and remained silent. Generally speaking, confidential information cannot be disclosed at will. Kuzan's rank is only the colonel of the headquarters for the time being, which is not high enough. Darren frowned, and instantly figured out the complicated joints, and said, I am the Commodore of the Navy headquarters. You should also know that I will be officially awarded the rank of Major General of the headquarters after graduating from the training camp. The messenger thought for a while, and then replied. The world noble celestial dragon was killed in the New World, and Admiral Sengoku has gone to sea to deal with it. The celestial dragon was killed. Darren was slightly stunned when he heard this. This is a rare thing. As the world noble, the celestial dragon is the existence standing at the peak of power and status in this sea. With the protection of the CP organization members, the general small-scale pirate groups cannot kill the celestial dragon. And the pirate groups that can thrive in that sea area have the ability to kill, but generally either dare not to kill or are too lazy to kill. After all, killing the celestial dragon will attract the personal dispatch of the Navy Admiral, and even the endless pursuit of the world government. Normally, no one would do such an unprofitable deal to cause endless trouble for killing a celestial dragon. Not everyone can be like him, with the identity of a navy as a cover, and create all kinds of suspense and cover up to hide all traces. At this moment, Darren always felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell why. Then the subordinates will leave first, and I still have to convey orders to other departments. The messenger saluted again, and then left in a hurry. It's really troublesome. I was thinking about going out to sea to play before graduation. Kuzan came over and said with annoyance. Darren shook his head. Let's go back first. Since the warring states generals have been dispatched, there will probably be news soon. Okay. Kuzan scratched his head boredly. The two then walked out of the abandoned military port quickly and walked towards the family compound. The sharp and piercing alarms continued to sound, and a low noise came from the big speakers installed on the street lamps. Marineford has officially entered a state of martial law. Please return home calmly and orderly. Don't be nervous, stay calm. I remind you again that Marineford has officially entered a state of martial law. Please return home calmly and orderly. Return home in an orderly manner. On the way back to the family compound, Darren and Kuzan frowned as they watched the hurried civilians and the Navy team responsible for maintaining order. A torn newspaper fell on the deserted street in the cold wind, and the depressing intense atmosphere permeated every corner of Marineford. Really, it's just a death of a celestial dragon. Is it necessary to have such a big reaction? Kuzan muttered a few words in a low voice, and it was obvious that he was dissatisfied with the martial law that caused his plan to go fishing to be stranded. Darren pursed his lips. Speaking of this, it was his fault. Since he killed Sild Saint last time, the trust of the world government in the Navy has been broken. Coupled with the defection of Drago, this doubt and distrust have been seriously aggravated. So this time the celestial dragons were killed again. In order to clear the suspicion, Sengoku simply ordered the entire Navy headquarters to enter a state of martial law to avoid any suspicion from the world government. "I'll go home first." Darren threw down a sentence and walked quickly towards home. He was not worried about Gion, after all, he grew up in the military department. But he was still a little worried about Tianyushi. "Please everything, thank you." Chapter 242. He's already here. The further you get towards the family compound, the fewer people there are on the road. The doors of shops on the originally bustling commercial street were closed, and some stalls were left there without time to clean up, still steaming hot, and the environment seemed extremely bleak. Darren's brows were frowning more and more. He only felt that the uneasiness in his heart was becoming more and more obvious, and his brain couldn't help but think quickly. Marshal Kong went out to sea to hunt down the great pirate, Lone Red, Barorik Redfield, and Vice Admiral Garp went to support. This is normal, after all, it happened in the original plot, and the final ending should be as Darren expected. The celestial dragons were killed, and the warring states general was dispatched. This is also normal. As the world's nobles, once the celestial dragons are harmed and threatened, the admirals of the Navy must put down any important tasks in their hands and go to protect them immediately. Since these two things are normal, then where does this feeling of uneasiness in my heart come from? Husband. Just when Darren was lost in thought, an anxious shout interrupted his meditation. Darren looked up and saw that in front of his family compound, Ashi, wearing a kimono and wooden clogs, was waving at him anxiously, with worry and fear in his autumn water eyes. "Ashi!" He shouted, walked up quickly, hugged Ashi in his arms, patted her back and comforted her. "It's okay. Don't be afraid, it's just that a celestial dragon was killed, and the headquarters has entered a state of martial law." Ashi raised her head timidly. "Celestial dragon? But who on this sea dares to attack the celestial dragon?" Her eyes were full of confusion. "So has Admiral Sengoku been dispatched?" Darren nodded and smiled. "Yes, Admiral Sengoku is the only admiral in the Navy headquarters now, and there is no other candidate except him. And Marshal Kong and Vice Admiral Garp have also gone out to sea to perform their missions. Now the high-end combat forces of the headquarters are busy at sea, so you don't have to worry." He stopped talking abruptly. "Husband." Tien Yushi noticed that Darren was different and looked up at Darren. But Darren was just standing there in a daze, and his expression suddenly became extremely serious, and his face was uncertain. New world, a certain island. The warship quickly docked. Warrior, wearing the admiral's cloak, jumped off the deck of the warship with a murderous momentum, and hundreds of elite soldiers of the headquarters with live ammunition followed closely behind him. The crime scene has been cordoned off by the nearby Navy and local government guards. A large number of people who don't know what's going on are looking out of the cordon, looking like they are watching the fun. "Get out of the way. Navy business. Get out of the way." The Navy stationed there, who were responsible for maintaining order, fired shots into the air to disperse the crowd and cleared a passage. Warring States strode forward, his expression extremely serious and his mood extremely bad. Another case of the killing of celestial dragons. Can these fat guys stay in their holy land peacefully? Must they run around the sea to have fun? Do they really think that no one dares to attack them in this sea? Thinking of the piles of documents waiting for him to deal with at the headquarters of the Navy, Warring States felt a splitting headache. But as a Navy admiral, his primary responsibility is to protect the rights and interests of the world government and the celestial dragons. He has no other choice but to temporarily put aside his worries. "Tisk, come and deal with it." Zhang Guo suddenly stopped. His eyes gradually widened, as if he saw something unbelievable. A shocking sword mark spread from his feet to the end of his sight, almost cutting the entire commercial street in half. In the middle of the commercial street, the body of the celestial dragon lay there, the body split into two. Blood soaked the broken floor tiles, and the glass cover exclusive to the celestial dragon was also cut in half. A bottomless chill suddenly surged from the soles of Zhang Guo's feet, rushing up along his spine, straight into his brain, making his scalp numb. Report to General Zhang Guo. According to the information provided by the CP guards, the attacker who launched the attack did not show up. They could not react at all. A sword energy suddenly fell from the sky and directly killed Jack Marsaint. A naval colonel ran back with sweat all over his head and reported respectfully. But Zhang Guo seemed not to hear his words, just stood there blankly, and his pupils gradually filled with bloodshot. Could it be? At this time, two figures wearing white silk robes and as pale as ghosts quietly appeared in front of Zhang Guo. The hoarse voice came out from under their weird masks, revealing a threat. Zhang Guo, the adults give you 3 days to arrest or kill the murderer. If within 3 days. Shut up. Zhang Guo suddenly roared angrily, interrupting the two CP members. The CP members were stunned, a little unbelievable, and then angrily said, "What is your attitude? Do you want to disobey the government's orders?" Zhang Guo glanced at them coldly, and the terrifying aura emanating from his body made the two people's tone stagnate. "I already know the identity of the murderer." He gritted his teeth, ignored the two arrogant CP members, and his brain worked quickly. If I am not wrong. The bad premonition in his heart surged wildly, causing a layer of fine cold sweat to seep out of Zhang Guo's forehead. Names flashed through his mind quickly. A second later, he made a decisive decision, took out the military Den Den Mushi, and dialed a certain signal. Brew brew, brew brew. The call of the Den Den Mushi seemed anxious and urgent in the dead silence, and Zhang Guo's heart was as tight as a bowstring. Answer it quickly. Brew. The Den Den Mushi communication was connected. General Zhang Guo. A deep voice came from the Den Den Mushi. Zhang Guo gritted his teeth and said, "You know it, right? A celestial dragon was killed, but this is just a trick. The goal is to lure me out. The real target of the murderer is Marinford." The Den Den Mushi paused for a moment. "Did you hear that, brat?" Zhang Guo saw that there was no response for a long time, and he became more and more anxious, and growled at the Den Den Mushi. "I know, General Zhang Guo." The voice sounded again. Zhang Guo took a deep breath, forced himself to calm down, and gave an order in a deep voice. "Of course, this is just my guess. I now grant you the temporary command of all the forces of the Navy headquarters. You must be ready for mobilization and vigilance, and be prepared to deal with everything in advance." "No need." The voice of Den Den Mushi interrupted Sengoku's words lightly. Sengoku was stunned, and then his pupils shrank into pinholes in an instant. Marinford, Marine Headquarters. Darren held the Den Den Mushi in his hand, pulled Tianyushi behind him, and raised his head with a grim look. The sky in the distance had become dark at some point. The dark clouds rolled, lightning and thunder roared, as if a terrifying storm was brewing. The corner of the Commodore's mouth curled up with a mocking sneer. "He's here." As soon as the voice fell, a rebellious figure with wildly dancing golden hair suddenly broke out of the clouds, and waves of domineering and majestic terrifying momentum vented wildly from his body, like a substantial storm, suddenly descending on the entire Marine headquarters. "Ha ha 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 Navy. This time, I'm going to kill enough. The legendary pirate, Golden Lion. Shiki. Invasion of the Navy headquarters. I ask for everything, thank you very much. Chapter 243. Are you here to get killed?" The violent laughter spread in the world of lightning and thunder, like the whisper of the devil at the end of the world, making people feel cold all over. Waves of boundless killing intent came straight at them, making the patrolling Navy officers in the naval port turn pale in an instant, as if they were falling into an ice cellar. That is. Damn, how could it be? Golden Lion Shiki. The legendary pirate, Golden Lion Shiki. How could he appear here? My God. The Navy and civilians of Marinford looked up in shock, looking at the Golden Lion in the sky. Their hearts were filled with shock and a storm. The legendary pirate, Shiki, dared to invade the Navy headquarters so recklessly. Is he crazy? Quick, go and inform Marshal Kong and Admiral Sengoku. A Navy shouted with a trembling voice, but his voice stopped as soon as he spoke, and his face turned pale. Marshal Kong and Admiral Sengoku both went out to sea for a mission. Ha 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 ha. Navy, you destroyed my fleet, this time I'm going to sink your headquarters into the sea. The golden lion in the sky was biting a lit cigar in his mouth and laughing wildly. He just waved his hand horizontally. The scene that shocked everyone in Marineford appeared. In the sky far behind the golden lion, a touch of red light suddenly appeared in the dark sea of clouds. Boom! A low roar came from the sea of clouds. The red light continued to expand and spread, like a blazing flame, and then suddenly penetrated from the thick black clouds. Under the Navy's gradually widening eyes, the low roar became sharper and finally deafening. It was not a ball of fire at all. It was a huge meteorite with a diameter of tens of meters. The madman Golden Lion actually used his devil fruit ability to float the fragments of the island into the sky and fell as meteorites. The fragments of the island fell madly under the action of gravity, and the bottom rubbed against the air to produce a fiery red flame, and the light emitted made the dim sky blood red. How is this possible? It's not a force we can resist. It's like a godly power. Too terrifying. Are we all going to die here? At this moment, hundreds of thousands of sailors and civilians stood there in a daze, their hands holding their weapons trembling slightly, like sculptures that had lost their souls. Their pupils reflected the falling meteorites, which looked like a doomsday disaster. The most important thing is that Marshal Kong, General Sengoku and Vice Admiral Garp were not present at this moment, and it was impossible for anyone to stop this guy Shiki the Golden Lion. But at this moment, as if a faint blue current passed through the void, the sailors suddenly saw an extremely strange scene. The muskets in their hands, the heavy artillery on the military forts and artillery platforms, and the artillery platforms on dozens of warships stationed in the port, all moved together. The muzzles, barrels, and holes of the guns suddenly adjusted their directions and aimed at the falling meteorites. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Boom! Countless bombardments exploded in every corner of the land of Marineford. Thousands of heavy artillery deployed by the entire Navy headquarters fired at the same time, pouring out flames crazily, and the exaggerated recoil even made the ground under their feet tremble. The airtight shells were like a huge black network, hitting the dozens of burning meteorites head-on. Continuous explosions exploded in the sky, and the dense flames illuminated the sky, and the entire horizon seemed to be burning. Under the bombardment of thousands of heavy artillery, dozens of falling meteorites were constantly blown to pieces, turning into countless dense fragments and fire rain that sank into the earth. Boom! 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 Buildings were hit by meteorite fragments, collapsed instantly, and soon caught fire. People and sailors on the streets fled in panic, avoiding the invasion of the rain of fire. Flames rose from everywhere, but at least there were not too many serious casualties. This is the ability of Commodore Darren. The Navy and civilians reacted quickly and cried out in surprise. Sure enough, we shouldn't have set up flags randomly. I didn't expect that they would actually invade Marineford. Darren stood in place, with arcs lingering between his fingers, and holding Tien Yushi, whose pretty face was pale, in his arms with one hand. A fragment of a meteorite fell behind him, blasting the family compound into pieces and turning it into a burning ruin. The hot wind rolled back from behind him, and the snow-white wide cloak fluttered wildly in the sparks and smoke. He raised his head and squinted his eyes, flashing with angry cold light. His sight collided with the unruly legendary pirate in the sky, as if sparks and lightning were splashing out. The corner of the Commodore's mouth suddenly curled up with a mocking sneer. "What's wrong, Golden Lion? It's not enough that I annihilated your flying fleet. Now you are coming to me to give yourself up." Hearing this, Golden Lion's breathing stagnated, and his violet eyes were filled with bloodshot. "You ignorant brat." He opened his arms at the same time, and looked at Darren with a fierce look in his eyes, like a beast that chooses people to devour. "Without Zhongguo, no one can protect you today. Darren brat." As soon as the voice fell, the surrounding navy was horrified to find that the ground under their feet suddenly shook violently. Like living things, huge amounts of sand and collapsed building debris poured up like seawater, and huge amounts of sand and stones instantly gathered into three ferocious and majestic lions. From the left, right, and back, they opened their bloody mouths and swallowed Darren, who was surrounded in the center. Its momentum was so overwhelming that hundreds of Navy officers around tried to shoot and attack, but they were unable to stop it. Lion's Might, Imperial Scroll. However, facing this attack that blocked all retreat routes, Darren's expression did not change at all. He raised his eyes and smiled faintly. Really? Suddenly. 3 tall figures in red, yellow and blue appeared at the left, right and back of Darren at the same time. Big fire spray. Light speed kick. Violent pheasant mouth. The violently boiling magma. The beam of scorching destruction. The bluebird of the extreme cold storm. Roared at the same time and hit the 3 arrogant and unruly lions that buried the earth. Boom. A deafening roar followed, and the giant creature summoned by the golden lion using the power of the devil fruit suddenly exploded and shattered under the attack of the 3 powerful figures. The light and shadow of the laser flickered endlessly. The flames of the magma surrounded the earth. The snow-white the ice crystals scattered. Darren looked at the frozen expression of the golden lion, and said with a smile. It seems that I have disappointed you. I am grateful for everything. Chapter 244 Monsters and Monsters. The city is burning, and black smoke is rising. Cries for help and cries of pain came from all over the Navy headquarters. The direction of the civilian area continued to cry. The Navy soldiers formed small teams and quickly organized the evacuation of civilians. It's really messy. In the rolling, boiling, bubbling magma, Sakaski's figure gathered again. Liquid magma dripped from his cheeks, he raised his hand to straighten his peaked military cap, and stared at the golden lion with cold eyes. Don't forget, this is the Navy headquarters. Countless golden photons also quickly gathered into a tall figure. Borsellino stroked his stubble and said with interest, the legendary pirate is so scary. He actually invaded Marineford. Inch by inch, ice crystals spread on the ground and spiraled upward to form a figure. Kuzan exhaled a breath of extremely cold air, and then looked at the golden lion with a flushed face, and said excitedly, ha 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 ha. This time it's finally my turn to play. Darren, now is the time for us to fight side by side. 3 tall figures slowly stepped forward and stood beside Darren, lined up in a row. The wide cloak of justice behind them fluttered in the wind. The 4 people just standing there gave people an indescribable sense of security. The whole audience was shocked. It's Major General Sakaski. Major General Borsellino. And that one is Colonel Kuzan. The 4 monsters from the Navy headquarters have all arrived. Great, we are saved this time. The surrounding Navy officers saw the 4 tall and unusual figures, clenched their fists with excitement, and couldn't help but shouting in surprise. I thought you were asleep. Darren looked at the 3 and complained indifferently. Sakaski didn't say anything. Borsellino shrugged and grinned. I've come as soon as possible. Kuzan scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. I did fall asleep just now. Darren. Ha 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 ha. A few Navy brats who are still wet behind the ears. At this time, the golden lion in the sky suddenly laughed wildly. Do you think you can stop me with just a few of you? Swoosh. A sound of breaking through the air suddenly rose. A white ice spear suddenly whistled towards the golden lion, interrupting the latter's words. It was Kuzan who couldn't hold back his inner fighting spirit and took the lead. The whistling sound came over him, and the golden lion's eyes shone, and he suddenly drew his sword. Clang! The ice spear was chopped into pieces, but the extreme coldness surged out of the broken ice spear and spread towards the golden lion's blade. A layer of ice crystals visible to the naked eye quickly climbed up the blade of the famous sword, dead wood, and it was about to freeze the golden lion's arm. HMPH. The golden lion snorted coldly, and the solemn and domineering spiral rolled up, blowing the ice crystals away and shattering them. Ha ha ha, the 4 of us are more than enough. Kuzan laughed excitedly, pointing at the golden lion in the sky, his eyes bursting with a fiery fighting spirit. It's impossible to capture Marineford with just you alone. As soon as these words came out, Sakaski frowned. Borissalino looked funny. A bad feeling welled up in Darren's heart. Hey, you can't just set a flag casually. Oh. The corner of the golden lion's mouth suddenly lifted, and a hint of teasing flashed in his eyes. Who said I'm alone? The moment the voice fell, a majestic and deep terrifying aura suddenly spread from another direction in the sky. Sakaski. Borisolino. Man. Kuzan. The corner of Darren's mouth twitched. I told you not to talk nonsense. Oh. Darren kid, sassy ignores Dana. A deafening laugh like thunder came from the horizon, and the gnashing of teeth revealed a solemn and ferocious hatred. In the thick clouds, a black shadow suddenly emerged, and then continued to expand at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it almost covered the sky and the sun. What is that? Could it be this size? Damn it. The Navy stared at the sky in horror. Lightning and thunder visible to the naked eye, bunches of purple lightning, crawled all over the sky in the sudden rolling wind. As countless lightning and winds appeared and disappeared, the huge shadow that covered the sky and the sun suddenly poked out a head as big as a mountain from the sea of clouds. Fierce teeth, sharp horns, long beards, blood-red vertical pupils. It's a dragon. Giant dragon. The strongest creature on land, sea and air. Kaido the beast. Kaido is here too. How? Maybe. Amid the sound of the Navy gasping, the green dragon surrounded by wind blades and lightning swam out from the sea of clouds, and the dragon's scales flashed a dark luster in the lightning, revealing a cold and hard texture. In an instant, the majestic momentum mixed with the dragon's might suddenly pressed down, and the hurricane made thousands of Navy officers stand unsteadily, and the weak ones directly rolled their eyes and fainted. The corners of Kuzan's eyes twitched. You must say. Darren sighed. Facing the strange eyes of Sakaski and Borsalino, Kuzan's face immediately flushed, and he said with a stiff neck. He's not looking for me. He's looking for you, Darren. Darren. Kaido, who turned into a dragon, exchanged glances with the golden lion, and then said fiercely. Shiki, leave Darren to me. I haven't settled the score with him for destroying my base camp. Golden Lion grinned. That won't do. These brats look like elites trained by the Navy. I want to kill them all. Kaido said angrily, this is different from what we agreed. Golden Lion sneered, if you have the ability to snatch the head from my hand, then come on. What are you kidding? Kuzan suddenly became furious. You actually look down on our Navy. There are 4 of us. You only have. Woo woo woo. Darren quickly covered his mouth. But it was too late. Mama. Another hoarse laugh came from the other side of the sky. Tear. Purple thunder leapt between the clouds and bloomed in an interlaced manner. As the clouds were constantly shaken and disintegrated, a graceful figure stepped on a black thundercloud, carrying an extremely huge long sword, and swooped down from the sky. Kaido, Shiki, the other little ghosts can be handed over to you, but Darren. Pink enchanting long hair, red lips, a pair of round and plump long legs wearing red fishnet stockings, licked her lips and smiled at Darren from a high position. He is mine. The entire Navy headquarters was silent for a moment. Then it was completely boiling. It's Big Katakana middle. Mom. One of the legendary pirates. Quote. Big Katakana middle. Mom Charlotte Katakana middle. Lin Ling. 3 great pirates from the New World. They are all here. Quote. The corners of Darren's mouth twitched wildly. Borisolino smiled playfully. Sakaski turned his head and looked at Kuzan expressionlessly, which only made the latter feel scared. Kuzan. I ask for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 245, I will protect you. Kuzan blushed and was about to say something. Shut up. Sakaski and Darren spoke coldly at the same time. Kuzan looked wronged and pointed at Darren indignantly. What does this have to do with me? Didn't you hear? They are all here to find Darren. Darren. He couldn't respond to this. But before Darren could explain, Kuzan suddenly realized something and trembled all over. The 3 legendary pirates are all targeting Darren. Darren's eyelids jumped. Sure enough, Kuzan stared at Darren with shining eyes, with stars of admiration in his eyes, and said excitedly. You are worthy of being my lifelong rival, this is so cool. Thinking of this, the boundless fighting spirit was rising and burning in Kuzan's chest like a flame. In this case, I have to work harder. He whispered softly, raised his hand suddenly, pointed at the three terrifying figures in the sky like ghosts and gods, and laughed loudly. Come on, big pirates. Today, we have 4 monsters from the Navy headquarters present. The noble justice we carry is burning like a flame. You evil people will never succeed. Please, can you say less? Darren covered his forehead with his hands in pain. Ha 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 ha, you ignorant Navy brats. Kuzan's provocation was very successful, and the golden lion laughed in anger. His figure floated up to the sky, holding the 2 swords in both hands, and was about to launch an attack. But Kaido was faster than him. No, he should be more impatient than him. Oh, then try to block my move. The dragon soaring in the sky roared like thunder, its huge head like a mountain suddenly raised up, and its scarlet blood basin mouth cracked to an exaggerated degree. Accompanied by the dragon taking a deep breath. In an instant, the air flow visible to the naked eye was sucked into the dragon's belly like a hurricane. The terrifying breath of destructive energy gathered madly in the dragon's mouth. In the environment of alternating wind and lightning, it exuded a chilling breath, and the dazzling red light continued to condense. This is... Darren's pupils shrank. It was that move. Darren, I will definitely kill you today. Kaido roared violently, and the cold murderous intent spread out from the huge body of the dragon. The flames gathered to the extreme in his mouth and suddenly sprayed out. Hot breath. The magnificent and surging fire column spread out from the sky like a red galaxy, and the terrifying heat almost melted the air. The dark red light instantly dyed the dark sky red. The overwhelming flames continued to expand in the pupils of Darren and the other 4, and the heat waves on their faces made their skin painful and their breathing dry. Ha 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 ha, it's actually fire. This is too much of an underestimation of us. Kuzan laughed carelessly. Darren, are you right? We are the Navy with the responsibility, how could we retreat? His body began to radiate extremely cold frost, and the surrounding hot air flow disappeared instantly. Whoever retreats is a low-level Navy. Kuzan proudly threw down a sentence and took a step forward. But at this moment, he seemed to realize something was wrong. Just when the flames were about to spread, Darren hugged Tien Yushi's slender waist with one hand and flew back quickly. Borisolino grinned, and his figure suddenly spread into countless photons, turning into a golden light and leaping into the sky. Sakazuki looked at Kuzan expressionlessly, and his figure disappeared from the spot with a shaving sound. Kuzan was the only one standing there, facing the flames that were shooting all over the sky, stunned. The smile on Kuzan's face suddenly froze. He was ice, and although he could suppress the flames to a certain extent, the flames could also hurt him. It would be difficult for him to breathe such a large range of flames alone. Just at this moment. Click. A steady and powerful footstep suddenly came from behind. Before Kuzan could react, a broad and burly figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The flamboyant purple short hair fluttered in the roaring heat wave, and the 2 black characters, Jung X, on the white and heavy white cloak danced like a mad dragon. Kuzan's eyes widened. The figure stepped forward in the face of the pouring flames that were enough to destroy the town. The dark-armed color domineering was like an active fluid, quickly covering his strong arms. He clenched into a fist. A punch like thunder blasted out heavily. Black arm meteor. Boom. The exploding impact wave, like a meteor shooting backwards, and like the Milky Way pouring back, met Kaido's hot breath head-on. The earth-shaking explosion broke out in the air, and the land within 100 meters was lifted up like waves under the invasion of the air wave, and countless burning buildings were uprooted. The Navy held on to the fixed objects tightly, and looked at the figure who shattered the dragon's breath with a punch and shock, and an unprecedented sense of security surged in their hearts. It seemed that as long as there was that solid back like a mountain, it would give people the confidence to win, and everything was possible. The wind was raging, and the exploding flames fell to the ground and lingered endlessly. The man opened his big hand, pinched out the remaining flames and sparks in front of him with one hand, turned back and grinned at Kuzan. Kuzan boy, I've told you so many times, think more before you act. Teacher Zepha. Kuzan stared at Zepha in front of him blankly, with admiration in his eyes. It's so handsome. Zeph. Okay, it's the same as not saying anything. He shook his head unhappily and explained. It took a little time to summon the combat force. At this time, figures came quickly from all directions. They held sabers in their hands, wore military uniforms, and looked extremely murderous, and fell behind Zepha one after another. Vice Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Davozier, greets Mr. Zepha. Rear Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Novi, greets Mr. Zepha. Commodore of the Navy Headquarters, Snyder, greets Mr. Zepha. The naval officers who came from various military fortresses have arrived one by one, looking at Zepha's back with indescribable admiration and excitement, and tightly grasping the sabers in their hands. Davozier, Novi, Snyder. Zephar's eyes swept across their familiar faces one by one, and a heroic smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's been a long time since you last followed me to fight, right? Dozens of naval commanders stood up straight, their eyes exuding a firm color, and they said loudly with boiling fighting spirit. 5 years. Yes, 5 years. Zeph sighed lightly, and a touch of emotion flashed in his eyes. All of them were his subordinates who had followed him to fight on the battlefield. I didn't expect that I, an old guy who had retired long ago, would have a day to fight on the battlefield again. Really, with old man Kong and Zhang Guo gone, Marineford can only be protected by me. He clenched his fists, looked up at the 3 pirates in the sky with gloomy faces, and smiled. Today, let me take you to fight again. I ask for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 246 I refused fiercely. Teacher Zephyr. Darren's figure fell from the sky behind. He had already sent Aishi to a safe place, where she was escorted by other Navy officers and other civilians to seek refuge. After all, Aishi lacked combat power, so if she was present, he had to devote his attention to protecting her. The next battle was about to begin. Darren was too busy with the battle. At the same time, Sakaski and Borsellino reappeared at the same place. Hey, you 3 guys are too immoral. Kuzan saw the 3 people and said angrily. Well, no one paid attention to him. Zeph nodded to the 3 people, squinted at the 3 pirates in the sky, and a solemn look flashed in his eyes under the sunglasses. Golden Lion, Kaido, Charlotte Linlin. Golden Lion Shiki is an old opponent to some extent. He has fought with the former many times and knows the horror of this guy's strength. As for Big Katakana Middle Mom Charlotte Linlin and Kaido of Beasts, these 2 guys are not as suffocating as Golden Lion in terms of breath, but they are also very difficult. At this moment, Zepha's eyes suddenly widened and his face was stunned. As if he saw something strange. Fire in the sky. Charlotte Lingling suddenly jumped up from the thundercloud Zeus, grabbed a ball of flames with a human-like sinister smile in her hand, and smashed down with her fist wrapped in surging flames. The target. It turned out to be the dragon floating in the sky. Boom. Kaido, who turned into a dragon, was hit hard. Under the inhuman terrifying power of Big Mom, the head of the blue dragon fell to the ground like a meteorite, and the eyeballs bulged out. The huge dragon body that covered the sky and the sun fell to the ground of Marineford, rolling continuously, crushing countless buildings and turrets, and raising billowing smoke and dust. Damn it! Lingling, what are you doing? The dragon roared furiously, and his eyes were full of bloodshot. Charlotte Lingling landed steadily, holding a huge long sword in one hand, and said angrily. Did you want to kill Darren just now? I said, he is mine. Kaido's body shrank rapidly and soon turned into a human form again. He rubbed his head, walked out of the huge pit with a black mace, rushed towards Big Mom, and said angrily. We all want to kill him, what's the difference? Let me kill him directly. Big Mom also rushed and roared. I won't allow you to kill him. The weapons of the 2 were wrapped with black and red lightning at the same time, and they smashed towards each other. Boom. The mace, 8 fasts, and the bicorn, Napoleon, collided with each other. No contact. A ball of surging and violent black and red lightning energy suddenly formed in the gap between each other. In an instant, a terrifying air wave broke out between the two demon-like figures. A bunch of black and red lightning spread out in all directions, forcing many Navy generals to retreat step by step, raising their arms to cover their cheeks, with a look of horror. A collision of domineering. The dark and heavy sea of clouds in the sky was constantly shaken and disintegrated, tearing a huge crack. What are those two guys doing? Why are they fighting suddenly? Wait, they seem to have a disagreement on how to deal with Commodore Darren. The Navy stared at Big Katakana Mom and Kaido, who suddenly fought, their faces full of disbelief. When the strong wind came, Zephy's eyes also flashed with a hint of doubt, and he couldn't help looking at Darren. Kuzan also looked at Darren with a suspicious face. The Commodore stood there with his eyes and nose, as if everything in front of him had nothing to do with him. At this time, a familiar figure also came from the direction of the rear. Darren. Teacher Zephyr. Let's join the battle too. The members of the training camp, led by Kaji and Gion, also held swords, stepped on the moon steps and shaved, and came behind everyone in a few flashes. They struggled to resist the domineering impact of Big Katakana Mom and Kaido, and their expressions were extremely shocked. Is that the strength of the legendary pirates? So scary. It's so strong that it doesn't look like a human. Kaido and Big Katakana Mom. They couldn't believe that there were people on this sea who could be so powerful. What they couldn't imagine even more was that their chief of the same period, Darren, had been fighting with such a monster before. Damn it, you crazy woman, why did you stop me from killing Darren, that bastard kid? At this time, Kaido's furious roar interrupted everyone's thoughts. His face gradually turned red, his long black hair danced wildly, his feet gradually plowed marks on the ground, and his body slid backwards. He destroyed my base camp. And this is different from the plan we agreed on. Don't you want to kill him too? Kaido stared at Big Katakana Mom in front of him. He killed your two sons. Charlotte Linling suddenly laughed like crazy. Who said I wanted to kill him? Kaido was stunned and retorted. Didn't you say, Darren is left to you? Charlotte Linling laughed. That's right. She turned her head, her sight locked onto Darren across a distance of thousands of meters. She licked her red lips with her red tongue, her eyes exuding a strong possessiveness, and she giggled. I mean, I want to get him. Let him be my husband, Charlotte Linlin. The world was silent for a second. Then, E.H. The Navy, which was counted before, and Kaido cried out in disbelief as if struck by lightning. Kaido's eyes popped out of his sockets. But just as he was stunned, the short-lived balance between the two was completely broken. Charlotte Linlin took the opportunity to bully Kaido, and a punch wrapped in armed color domineering hit Kaido's abdomen heavily. Bang! Kaido's figure flew backwards, smashing through more than a dozen buildings before sinking into the center of a military fortress. The walls of the military fortress were suddenly covered with dense cracks, but Kaido pulled his body out of the deep pit as if nothing had happened, dumbfounded. It was not just him. The golden lion in the sky was also stunned. The Navy turned their heads in confusion and stared at the Commodore with twitching eyes. Facing the strange eyes of the crowd, Darren's mouth twitched. She is dead. Trying to maintain an expressionless state and resisting the urge to dig his toes on the ground, Darren made his tone as calm as possible and said righteously. Don't worry, I rejected it fiercely. Everyone. Zephyr covered his heart with a painful expression. Gion was like a frost. Borisolino smiled playfully. Sakaski's eyes were shrouded in haze. Kuzan looked admiring, too cool. Others were stunned. Only Kaji looked at the charming and lazy mature Big Katakana Mom, then looked at Darren, and finally wailed in pain. Damn it, why can't good things happen to me? I ask for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 247 The Name of the Black Arm. No one paid attention to Kaji, the pervert who was squatting on the ground with tears streaming down his face. The whole audience was silent. Everyone stood there with a dull look on their faces, as if struck by lightning, and couldn't believe what they heard. They looked at the great pirate Big Katakana Middle. Mom, who was standing there with a huge long sword and drooling over Darren, and then looked at the righteous Commodore, and their mouths twitched wildly. The legendary great pirate, Big Katakana Middle. Mom Charlotte Katakana Middle. Lingling, actually, targeted, Commodore Darren. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through the minds of each of them, constantly intertwined and confused. The brain was almost smoking. Commodore Darren has made outstanding military achievements, extraordinary means, and outstanding talents. Since he joined the Navy, he has shown talents that ordinary people cannot match, whether in the Navy or after coming to the headquarters. His dazzling brilliance even overwhelmed Major General Sakaski, Major General Borsellino, and Colonel Kuzan, who also had the title of Monster, to some extent. This is a well-known fact. But another well-known fact is that Commodore Darren is also the biggest scum in the history of the Navy. He is generous and has a huge wealth that does not match his legal income. And he has always been open to beauty, which was heard by the Navy headquarters even when he was serving in the North Sea. As for Big Katakana Middle. Mom Charlotte Katakana Middle. Linlin. This pirate who conquered cities and established the vast territory of Totland in the New World dominated that sea area with his terrifying strength beyond monsters and marriage. According to incomplete statistics, Charlotte Linlin has more than 25 legal husbands. One is a scum who loves women, and the other is an older woman with too many husbands to count. Both of them have iron bodies. If we put aside the hostile camps between the Navy and the pirates, we have to admit that this pair of dogs and bitches seems to be quite compatible. Bullshit. The Navy's faces became crazy. Zeph's old face became very dark, staring at Darren, clenching and unclenching his fists, unclenching and clenching again. At this time, Kaido suddenly roared like thunder. "I don't care, you crazy woman, I just want to kill that damn Navy kid." His pupils instantly turned red, and dense bloodshot lingered around. The muscles of his feet suddenly bulged, and while a huge pit was stepped out of the ground under his feet, the figure had already shot towards Darren at an astonishing speed like a cannonball. Darren's pupils shrank slightly. The surrounding Navy could not catch Kaido's figure at all. They only felt a majestic hurricane whistling past, and the demon-like figure had suddenly appeared in front of Darren. Purple lightning burst out from the huge mace, as if the mace covered with spikes dragged Kaido's burly body and smashed towards Darren. Thunder Bagua. But at this moment, a black military boot suddenly stepped in. While stepping on Kaido's mace with a clang, he stepped down heavily. Boom. The ground within 100 meters suddenly collapsed, and countless cracks appeared on the ground. Rough rocks splashing, the violent air wave rolled up the wide cloak of justice. Everyone was stunned. Teacher Zephyr. Zephyr stepped on Kaido's mace with one foot, and his fist wrapped in the dark-armed color domineering hit the latter's abdomen like a meteorite. Although Darren is a bastard, he is also my student. The air was directly pierced by Zephyr's punch, and circles of white air waves burst out. Kaido's pupils shrank. The body instantly rose by 1 meter, and pieces of solemn green dragon scales grew on the surface of the body, and the thick dragon tail extended from the tail vertebrae. Human beast type Katakana Middle. Dragon man form. You retired old man, don't come out to get in the way. Kaido roared and swung out the sharp dragon claws heavily. Bang! The dragon claws and black wrists collided violently, bursting out violent air waves. A large number of sparks illuminated Zephyr's sunglasses, and the thick dragon tail that was swung like a stone pillar was reflected in the sunglasses. However, the next second, the dragon tail that pierced the air was caught by Zephyr with one hand. Kaido's expression froze, and his vertical pupils shrank into needles. His own power was suppressed by this guy. How is this possible? Looking at Zephyr's arms covered with strict black armor, Kaido felt a chill in his back for no reason. I haven't been active in the sea for too long. It seems that I have been underestimated. Zephyr raised his head with cold eyes and sneered. Kaido boy, when I was roaming the sea, you little reptile was hiding on rocks, shipped to clean the toilet. As soon as the voice fell, Kaido felt a strong drag coming from the tail, and the next second, the world was spinning in front of his eyes. I saw Zephyr roared with anger, gritted his teeth, grabbed Kaido's tail with one hand, and the knotted muscles on his arm bulged. The moment he took a step, he threw Kaido into the air, and then threw him heavily in the direction of Charlotte Linlin with great force. I am Black Arm Zephyr. Caught off guard, Big Katakana Middle. Mom was hit head-on by Kaido. The two flew backwards like huge sandbags, and fell heavily into the ruins of a military fortress, raising smoke and dust. Leave Kaido and Big Katakana Middle. Mom to me. Darren is responsible for the battlefield command. After saying this, Zephyr roared out without any hesitation, raising his arms and shouting, "Defend Marineford! For justice!" The steady and powerful voice seemed to reveal an inspiring power, making everyone present instantly boil with blood. They looked at the purple-haired figure with shock on their faces, and felt as if the blood in their bodies was about to burn. The Navy generals who had followed Black Arm Zephyr to fight in the sea were so excited that their faces flushed, their eyes were dazed, and they couldn't help but murmured. The back of Admiral Zephyr. It's been a long time since I last saw him. Perhaps many young Navy officers only have the impression that Zephyr is an old instructor with a bad temper. But these old Navy officers remember deeply. Back then, that man led their Navy to achieve so many glorious victories with his pair of black iron fists and his overwhelming charge. The name, Black Arm, is not a nickname that was hyped up. It is the reputation that Zephyr earned through real bloody battles and punch after punch. Kill. Follow Zephyr teacher and charge. Forward. For justice. Instantly, the shouts of the Navy shook the earth. I ask for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 248, 1 against 2. Along with the deafening shouts and the sound of the charge, more Navy officers from the Navy headquarters have arrived at this time. The densely packed troops formed a defensive camp and rushed over from all directions. Shoot. Bombard. The Navy officers began to attack, and the muskets in their hands kept spewing flames. Someone controlled the turrets in the distance and fired wildly at the three pirates. How naive. Golden Lion grinned with contempt, and his figure rose rapidly into the air. His eyes were surging with strange red light, and his body moved flexibly, easily avoiding the fierce firepower of the Navy. Boom boom. Bullets and artillery poured into the ruins of the military fortress like a violent storm, with smoke and flames rising into the sky. However, the next second, Kaido and Big Katakana Middle. Mom walked out of it unscathed. The bullets and shells fell on them, either bounced back directly or the explosion only slowed down their steps, and could not cause any substantial damage at all. It hurts so much. Kaido rubbed his head and crawled out of the ruins, grinning at Darren in the distance, and finally locked his vicious eyes on the looming figure in the smoke in front of him. His eyes became gloomy. This guy's armed color domineering was so powerful that the punch just now made his arm feel a burning pain. You two just stay here obediently, don't think about going over, I will not let you get Darren. A low and sharp voice sounded. Zephyr walked out of the billowing black smoke, the white cape behind him swaying gently with his footsteps, staring at the two people in front of him with a murderous look, and his figure blocked their view of Darren. Whether it's his life or his body. Kaido looked at the former admiral in front of him who was as insurmountable as an iron wall, and suddenly turned to Big Katakana Middle. Mom next to him and grinned. Hey, crazy woman, it seems that this old guy wants to fight two people alone. Big Katakana Middle. Mom gave a magnetic giggle, licked her lips and said. Well, there's really no way. We haven't joined forces for a long time, Kaido. Although I really want to take Darren away directly, it seems unlikely now. But. She looked up at the purple-haired Navy in front of her and laughed sarcastically. Are you sure that you, a retired admiral, can really stop the two of us? Looking at the two people standing side by side, Zephyr's eyes flashed with an indelible fear. The physical strength of Kaido and Big Katakana Middle. Mom is so strong that the fierce firepower advantage of the Navy is useless to them. From the brief fight just now, Zephyr estimated that even the vice admiral of the headquarters would find it very difficult to break their defense. If these two, ferocious beasts, break into the Navy's battle formation or even the civilian area, I am afraid there will be a terrible disaster. No one can stop them, and Marineford will suffer heavy casualties. Zephyr must not watch this happen. In addition, the most important point is that Zephyr himself will become particularly passive against the Golden Lion. Although Kaido, Big Katakana Middle Mom and Golden Lion all have the ability to fly, but compared to the, relatively bulky, of the first two, Golden Lion's flying ability is much more flexible and agile. If it is a close combat, Zephyr is confident that he can intercept Golden Lion. But with Golden Lion's insidious and cunning character, I'm afraid he won't give himself a chance to get close. In this case, I might as well forcibly hold back Kaido and Big Katakana Middle Mom, and leave Golden Lion to Darren and the others. After all, Darren and Borsalino have the ability to fly at high speed, plus Sakasuke's attack power and Kuzan's control. They should be able to stop Golden Lion. Kaido of Beasts, Big Katakana Middle Mom Charlotte Katakana Middle Linlin. If I remember correctly, you are all remnants of the Rocks pirates. Right. Zephyr whispered softly. Kaido and Big Katakana Middle Mom were both stunned at the same time, and then sneered. That's right, but the navy that participated in the Battle of God Valley that year was not you. Zephyr took out a cigar from his uniform pocket, bit it and lit it. Yeah, it wasn't me who played that year. He looked down at his rough hands with blurred palm lines, and took a deep puff of the cigar. After a second of silence, he suddenly grinned. I'm not a hero after all. But at least. He took a deep breath, raised his head, and his momentum continued to rise under the surprised eyes of Big Katakana Middle Mom and Kaido, and laughed heroically. Today, even if I risk my life, I will stop you. The thought flashed through his mind, and the moment he made the decision, Zephyr's eyes burst out with unprecedented firmness. A dense black quickly stained Zephyr's arms, and he moved his wrists and neck, making a crackling sound like fried beans. As for fighting 1 against 2, how do you know it won't work if you don't try it? As soon as the words fell, Zephyr's military boots sank deeply into the ground. At the moment of exerting force, the land within a radius of 100 meters collapsed, cracks were everywhere, and mud and rocks rose like a fountain. With a bang, Zephyr's figure was like a tiger out of a cage, with a mad arc at the corner of his mouth biting a cigar, and he rushed towards Kaido and the other two. Here I come. Kaido clenched his mace, and his eyes suddenly tensed up a bit. At this moment, the momentum burst out by the former admiral of the Navy. Where was the old man's decadence and dejection, only the confidence to move forward? Then let's start. Big Katakana Middle Mom laughed, and swung his hand to slap a cannonball that was fired in the face away, and it exploded with fire beside him. Soul liberation. She opened her arms. Countless pale souls flew out of her body, wailing and blowing cold winds. I will give you souls. Wake up, my servants. Big Katakana Middle Mom laughed loudly, making a deafening sound, and the air around her became blurred under the violent sound waves. Countless pale souls quickly sank into the surrounding environment. The ground, boulders, building wreckage, artillery. Then an incredible scene appeared. After being given souls by Big Katakana Middle Mom, these dead things came to life one after another, turning into hideous monsters, rumbling on the ground, and rushing towards the Navy in the distance in hundreds and thousands. Bring my husband here. Big Katakana Middle Mom laughed shrilly, grabbed the giant long sword transformed by the bicorn Napoleon with one hand, and rushed out from the spot with Kaido at the same time. The next second, the three of them collided like a comet hitting the earth. Boom. The entire island seemed to tremble at this moment. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 249 Cruel War. Boom. After the injection of the wailing souls, the buildings and turrets kept waking up, turning into giants several meters or even more than 10 meters high, emitting shrill wails and charging towards the Navy defense camp. The building stretched out its huge arms of rock, clenched them into fists, and swept away more than a dozen Navy soldiers in front of it horizontally, with rocks flying everywhere. The military fortress made full use of the turrets it carried, one arm turned into a cannon, and fired at the most densely populated area of the Navy. As the explosions bloomed, it was unknown how many Navy soldiers were blown away. From a distance, the Soul Monsters' charge was like a mighty torrent of war, destroying everything they passed and raising huge waves of dust. They had sinister human smiles on their faces, like war machines that destroyed cities and strongholds, destroying buildings and trampling the earth. The Navy was caught off guard and their defense camp was broken, and they retreated step by step. Damn, what are these? They are dead things, but they all turned into monsters. They were given souls by Big Katakana Middle. Mom. Big Katakana Middle. Mom Charlotte Lingling is the sole soul fruit user, who can extract the souls of others and give souls to any object, making them her servants and fighting for her. The bullets have no effect. Damn it. The Navy tried to attack with the muskets in their hands, but the bullets that poured down like a rainstorm fell on the monsters, made of rocks and steel, but bounced back one after another, leaving only a few traces on their surface. Boom. A shell suddenly whistled and exploded on the head of a soul monster. While smoke billowed, the monster's head was blown to pieces. The huge body of the soul monster shook, and then collapsed. Use artillery fire. Use heavy artillery to attack their heads. A Navy Major General carrying a heavy artillery on his shoulder shouted loudly. There was a hideous scar on his face, and his expression was resolute and calm. He looked like an expert with extremely rich combat experience. It was as if he was an old subordinate who had followed Zephyr to fight. Major General Novi. After being reminded, other Navy officers also reacted immediately, stopped sniping, quickly distanced themselves from the soul monsters, and looked for fixed artillery positions for artillery fire. However, the soul monsters did not give them any chance at all, and, relentlessly, rushed up, crowding the battlefield. Damn it, there is no chance at all. The number of artillery positions is far from enough. They move too fast. The Navy officers struggled to hold on, and continued to collapse under the tide-like attack of the soul monsters. Suddenly, a tall figure nimbly jumped up from behind the crowd. The long black hair danced lightly in the wind, the beautiful figure set off the perfect curves, and the snow-white cloak of justice fluttered. Clang! The sound of the golden sword being unsheathed was clear and high-spirited. The dazzling sword light suddenly chopped down a soul monster transformed from a turret. Swish! The slender incision was vertically arranged in the middle of the monster's body, splitting the latter neatly in two. It's Lieutenant Colonel Guillaume. You are worthy of being a genius of the headquarters. What a strong swordsmanship. Amid the cheers of the people around him, Guillaume's figure landed steadily, his expression was indifferent but his eyes were filled with haze. Due to the material of these soul monsters, their defense is extremely amazing, and their only weakness is the head. As for other parts, even if they cut off their hands and feet, they can quickly use the materials in the surrounding environment to reassemble the broken body. Well done. At this time, a hoarse voice sounded beside him. Guillaume turned his head and saw a middle-aged Navy man wearing a peaked cap. One of his eyes was blind, and his white eyeball looked very scary. He held a huge 2-meter-long sword in his hand. The sword was specially made, but it looked very old, and the blade was covered with tiny gaps. Vice Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Davosier. An elite navy who also followed Zephyr to fight in the sea. Vice Admiral Davosier. Guillaume whispered. Davosier clenched the sword in his hand and said hoarsely. Lieutenant Colonel Guillaume, such a battle may be too early for the students in your training camp. But we have nowhere to retreat. Guillaume continued his words in a low voice. Davosier was startled, then laughed. You are worthy of being General Zephyr's student. He clenched the saber in his hand, stared at the soul monsters that were roaring with his only remaining eye, and said loudly. These things can be harmed by domineering power, all the Navy who have mastered domineering power, step out. With a swish. Hundreds of Navy soldiers were suddenly jumped out of the crowd, his eyes were firm. His movements were without any hesitation, and he stood at the forefront of the defense camp. A wisp of purple-black light quickly spread out from their hands, instantly covering their sabers. One after another, resolute faces, a pair of calm eyes, full of momentum, full of bravery on the battlefield. These are the most elite troops in the Navy headquarters. Davosier turned his head to look at Guillaume, and behind her, the many officers in the training camp, and a blatant smile suddenly appeared on his ugly and rough face. "Now, it's time for you to verify the results of the training camp." After the voice fell, Davoser, this 45-year-old, semi-retired vice admiral of the headquarters suddenly burst into a roar. Holding the broken saber full of gaps, he rushed out first. "For justice." He didn't say anything to Guillaume and the others like, "You are still in the training camp, retreat quickly," or something like that. Apart from their status as students in the training camp, Guillaume and the others are elites carefully selected from various seas and military departments. After the training in the training camp, their strength has skyrocketed a lot, and almost everyone has mastered domineering. The most important thing is, as Guillaume said, they have nowhere to retreat. This is the Marine headquarters, Marineford. Even if they fight to the last man, they must stick to their posts. In an instant, along with Davoser's reckless charge, the elites of the Navy also rushed out together, relying on their domineering aura to push forward. With their flesh and blood bodies, they collided heavily with the steel torrent composed of the soul monsters. At the same time, the pressure on the Navy soldiers who did not master the domineering power suddenly eased. Under the command of officers at all levels, they quickly controlled the artillery, dragged out mobile artillery from the armory, and fired wildly at the head of the soul monster. The Navy was blown away, the corpses were trampled, the monsters were roaring, and the artillery kept exploding on the battlefield of Marineford. Shouts, charges, collisions, and the roar of artillery. Blood rain splashed, and rocks were scattered. Everything that came into view became blurred and bloody. The cruel war started completely. I beg for everything, and I am grateful. Chapter 250 Ordinary People and Monsters. Die for me. A wretched figure rolled quickly in the air and landed on the head of a 20-meter-high fortress monster. The monster transformed from the military fortress was obviously stunned, as if it was very confused about the little guy in front of it. "Don't underestimate me." Kaji gritted his teeth and used his hairy legs to tighten the monster's head, his fists wrapped in dark armed color domineering, and his fists fell like a storm. "I am the genius of the Marine headquarters." Boom boom. Under the stunned expressions of the surrounding navy, the head of the fortress monster was smashed to pieces by Kaji's random punches, and then collapsed like a building, breaking into countless rocks. Ah! Kaji stood up from the ruins of the fortress, opened his arms with red eyes, and countless broken stones splashed from his body. Lieutenant Colonel Kaji. So strong. His close combat level. He is worthy of being a genius of the headquarters. The Navy soldiers looked at Kaji, who was like a god of war, in shock, and suddenly felt that the latter's wretched face was covered with a handsome halo at this time. I saw Kaji roaring to the sky in grief. A beautiful mature woman like Big Katakana Middle. Mom. Actually fell for Darren instead of me. How can I fix it? Bang. The surrounding Navy fell to the ground with black lines on their heads. The halo was instantly broken. Before they could come to their senses, Kaji had already rushed towards another soul monster again, cursing. Under the bonus of the furious state, this guy directly turned into a rampaging humanoid beast, tearing the fortress with his hands, and smashing the monsters made of rocks and steel wherever he passed. Flame Katakana Middle. The figure flashed across the ground. The hideous monster that had trapped several young Navy soldiers in a dead corner and was about to trample them into blood foam suddenly stopped. Swish! The slashing sword mark exploded on the monster's head, and a beam of hot flames sprayed out from it. The body of the monster shook and then collapsed. The Navy soldiers trembled and looked pale at the bearded young man who landed steadily on the wreckage of the monster. The latter was biting a cigar and smiled gently. "Are you all right?" The Navy soldiers came to their senses and nodded in unison. They noticed that the bearded young man's hand holding the knife was dripping with blood. "Then please go over there to evacuate the civilians, okay?" The bearded young man asked with a smile. Yes, sir." The Navy soldiers stood up and ran in the direction the young man pointed. Looking at their backs, the bearded young man smiled, spitting out a stream of white smoke from his mouth, and tightened his saber. "Hey, Huo Shaoshan, how are you over there?" A cold voice came from the far left. Huo Shaoshan, who had a long beard, turned his head and saw the gloomy ghost spider walking down from a fallen soul monster. The latter had a glaring blood stain at the corner of his mouth. The gray-white long hair danced flexibly like the 8 claws of a spider, and the 8 sabers danced with a whistling sound. These things are not easy to deal with. Huo Shaoshan sighed. He looked in other directions. Stalaberry, Doberman, Dalmesia and other training camps were also caught in a difficult battle at the same time. These soul monsters created by Big Katakana Middle Mom are huge in size and extremely powerful. A casual punch can blow up a building. Every step the ground under their feet seems to be wailing. Just now, in order to save a few fleeing civilians, he blocked the punch of the soul monster head-on, and his tiger mouth instantly broke, and his arm was burning. If it weren't for the armed color domineering as a defense, if he only relied on his flesh and blood to resist, I'm afraid his arm would have been shattered. Not everyone is like Darren, that freak, who can fight the giants with bare hands. Are you scared? Ghost Spider raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth and said coldly. Huo Shaoshan laughed. He raised his eyes and looked into the distance. In that direction, 4 figures of completely different colors were surrounding the unruly golden lion at a very fast speed and launching a crazy offensive. From a distance, it seemed as if 4 cruel and calm-hungry wolves were challenging the king of the jungle. Each of their attacks burst out with amazing air waves that could affect hundreds of meters, and the earth continued to collapse and tear apart. Magma, beams, frost, electromagnetics, sword beams. The area within a radius of several kilometers radiating from the 5 people has completely turned into a hellish dead land that no one can set foot on. The pressure faced by Darren and Kuzan is much more terrifying than ours. Huo Shaoshan murmured. Ghost Spider frowned and squinted. They are monsters, but we are not. Huo Shaoshan grinned. Monsters have their own way of fighting, but ordinary people have their own responsibilities. Swish. A flaming red flame burned violently on the blade of Huo Shaoshan's saber. The dancing flames made his broad and gentle face firm and resolute. There was an unprecedented yearning in his eyes as he looked in that direction. I really want to fight side by side with them. Huo Shaoshan murmured, holding the knife tightly. After that, he suddenly rushed towards another huge monster that was trampling on him. Lion's Might, Earth Scroll. The ground within 100 meters suddenly bulged, and instantly gathered into a huge lion hundreds of meters high, roaring wantonly, opening its bloody mouth and completely swallowing a figure. However, the next moment, a surging column of magma suddenly spurted out from the belly of the solidified rock lion. Dense cracks continued to appear on the surface of the giant, and amazing red light seeped out from the cracks. Boom! The magnificent magma flames soared into the sky, completely burning the solidified giant lion. Liquid magma flowed on the ground, melting the cold frost. Sakazuki held his military cap with one hand and walked out of the magma step by step. Blood oozes from the corners of his mouth. He looked at the golden lion in the sky and said coldly. The legendary pirate can only play such tricks. Ha 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 ha. You are obviously injured, you are really a stubborn kid. The golden lion holding the double swords laughed loudly. Just as he was about to say something, a flash of red light suddenly flashed in his violent eyes. His eyeballs turned. The dazzling golden light suddenly gathered into a human figure behind him, and a white leather shoe turned upside down and volleyed. Have you been kicked by the speed of light? Borisolino's figure gathered, one hand groped the stubble on his chin, and one foot with the penetrating power of a beam of light kicked the back of the golden lion's head. Ask for everything, grateful.